He will be in Alabama at the Republican Party winter meeting. Would not surprise me if he did not make a visit to Tennessee very soon. And so it goes. Two candidates, viable. I say that with air quotes because of the name I'm about to say. Two candidates already announcing, Donald Trump and Nikki Haley. Air quotes. And Ron DeSantis expected to make a decision by May. Nikki Haley is under fire as being someone, MSNBC, the mainstream media, I have long said, is going to be the ruination of the United States of America. When America falls, it is going to be largely at the hands of the mainstream press because they are taking dumb people and making them dumber. And they're using dumb people for their own purposes. And sadly, we see it on a day-to-day basis, and no one does anything about it. I don't know what you could do outside of turning your televisions off, which is why I say don't watch this garbage. I'll watch so you don't have to, okay? But MSNBC actually had the temerity, I have the clip, to say that Nikki Haley was using her color as a shield to promote white supremacy. I wonder if MSNBC feels the same way about Clarence Thomas. It's very well what they're doing, but they're using their color as a shield to promote white supremacy. It's not only ridiculous and harmful and shameful, but it is damaging. It is creating a schism in the United States of America that might not be able to come back from. I don't want to overstate it, but it's true. All of that upcoming on The Drive with no Brian Wilson, Matt Murphy, and for Brian. But I start here. Joe Biden is in Ukraine. The president of the United States made a surprise trip to the beleaguered and embattled nation of Ukraine, a trip that received much applause on the part of the political left and the aforementioned mainstream media. That's essentially a propaganda wing for many within the political party. President Joe Biden stating that our support of Ukraine is, well, I don't know that he used the term never-ending, but I would. I mean, it seems that it is a never-ending level of support in terms of the amount of money that we're willing to give these folks. I believe that Joe Biden, in part, he was planning a trip to Poland, to Warsaw, Poland. I believe that the powers that be scheduling this took the opportunity to take attention, maybe not exclusively off of East Palestine, Ohio, but certainly it was an advantageous reason to go to Ukraine, was it not? I mean, ultimately, the president can't do anything in Ukraine that he could not do right here, or he could not do in Warsaw, Poland. If you want to give him kudos for stylistic points, I suppose that's fair. But I find it convenient and disturbing that while the people of the United States of America are suffering in part due to the ineptitude of the Biden administration, in real time, you have people that are suffering in East Palestine, Ohio. In real time, and this is far more widespread, spread out and rampant, you have people on the southern border, in southern border towns, who are at this time suffering because of the policies of the Biden administration. In real time, you have people that cannot drink their own water in East Palestine, Ohio. Now, I'm not giving Ohio Governor DeWine a pass. I'm certainly not giving Norfolk Southern a pass. But ultimately, when a calamity along these lines is mishandled in this fashion, one would think the Emergency Management Agency, the FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the National Transportation Board, the Secretary of Transportation, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the National Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency would be ones, and ultimately the President of the United States of America would be the ones to step in and say, enough. We are taking over this operation. We're going to find out what's going on. We're going to get to the bottom of who made the decision to allow these people back into their homes after this controlled burn. As a matter of fact, we're going to get to the bottom of the controlled burn itself to find out why that was decided and if it needed to be decided and if it was the right decision. It might turn out that it was the right decision. I don't know. I know this. Telling people 2 days later that it was perfectly acceptable for them to go back home and use their drinking water was not the right decision. And heads should be rolling as to whoever made those decisions, but they're not. It is largely met with a wave of the hand as if it's an inconvenient distraction on the part of the Biden administration. I mean, there's people who might lose their lives over this. American citizens need Joe Biden right now to act like a leader. And instead, Joe Biden's shaking the hands of his best buddy, Vladimir Zelensky, in Ukraine. I'm telling you that I do not believe, and we'll never find the truth, because the White House would never admit it. The White House rarely tells us what they are going to do more than 24 or 48 hours in advance. I mean, there are certain expectations that we have that the president, we know the president will attend a State of the Union address. We know the president will attend certain ceremonial activities. But you rarely know the specifics on time frame as to what the president is going to do more than 48 hours out. But I believe that Joe Biden went to Ukraine specifically to avoid having to face his own citizens in East Palestine, Ohio, and beyond. And I believe he wants to draw the immediate attention away from the humanitarian disaster that has occurred in that town. It was a PR move that will in no way help the Ukrainian people. In no way. And I'm sick to death of being told that I'm pro-Russia simply because I want some sort of accountability on the billions and billions of dollars that we're sending to that country. That's all I'm asking for, is a basic line-by-line invoice as to what exactly we're paying for. Because Joe Biden told us 24 hours ago that we're literally putting money into the pockets of the Ukrainians while Americans are suffering through his presidency. And if it sounds like that makes me mad, it's because it does. Just getting started. Roadways looking kind of gross out there. We're going to try to keep you up to date with what's going on the roadways as well. There's some nastiness going on the northwest side of the loop and out toward the airport. You don't want to go on I-40 if you're going toward the airport because there's wrecks that are causing not just slowdowns but absolute shutdowns on 40 between, what is that? That's between Donaldson Pike and, as I demonstrate to everyone on Super Talk TV that I can't really see, and Old Hickory Boulevard. So it's all red between Donaldson Pike and Old Hickory. We'll keep you up to date on this President's Day. We'll also have some fun talking about your favorite and least favorite presidents of the United States of America. Plus, I went to my first basketball game over the weekend. There's lots to unpack. It's 3:23. Matt Murphy in for Brian Wilson on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
talking about truck beds. All that and more, 5:30, 3:30. Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Hey, it's McMorey back there in the newsroom. Love seeing him back there. Wayne's at the controls, making sure that everything that comes out of our speaker sounds as good as humanly possible. It is 3:28 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. So we'll get to Mac coming up in just a couple of minutes. Your telephone calls are always welcome as we open up the phone lines on occasion on the drive on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. That number, 615-737-9986. More presently, you can also super text us, and that number is the same, 615-737-9986. I also invite you, although I can't account for what you're going to see, but I invite you to be a part of Super Talk TV. Super Talk WTN TV can be found on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. All you need to do is go to any – I've never been to Twitch in my life, so I don't know anything about Twitch. That's for the youngsters. That's for the McMorreys of the world. But for me, for my money, if you go over to the YouTubes or the Facebooks or the Twitters, you can find us by typing in Super Talk 99.7 WTN. You'll see my ugly mug. It'll say the Matt Murphy Show there. Never you fear. It's the drive, but Brian's setup is for his home as opposed to here in studio where I'm broadcasting from. So the call-in numbers and all of the rest of that stuff is the same. And Wayne, congratulations. You're working hard. I know you're working hard and tirelessly on trying to figure all this out on the fly. Mm-hmm. It is one thing to come in and train on it, which I saw you doing last week. It's another thing to be in it, in the midst of it. McMorrey's back there assisting you. You're taking care of business, and kudos to both of you guys. So I appreciate both of you for working hard to make sure that this component that is relatively new to what we do on Super Talk is up and running. I mentioned that Jimmy Carter is in hospice. Do we have an ability, I wonder, and I'll get back to Joe Biden and his Ukrainian trip in a moment. Do we have the ability, I wonder, to separate his performance as president of the United States and our thoughts about that, to separate that from the man himself and to understand what an incredible human being everyone that has known him, met him, sat with him. I had one opportunity to meet Jimmy Carter 25 years ago. He was blowing through Montgomery, Alabama, and I was a part of a greeting line, so I don't presume that I had any opportunity to, speak words of any note to him. I just had an opportunity to meet him. And you know what? Regardless of what type of president he was, regardless of what letter he had behind his name, when you have a chance to meet a sitting or former president of the United States of America, you do that. By all accounts, he was a genuine, good-hearted, faithful Christian man, and is a good-hearted, faithful Christian man. And I do have the ability to separate that to what I think of his presidency. And I didn't think much of his presidency. I think he may go down when all is said and done as one of the worst 5 presidents in American history. And we had Warren G. Harding as our president at one point. And he was awful. Awful. Just look it up. Woodrow Wilson, awful. Socialist. And then you have Jimmy Carter. The work that he did from a humanitarian standpoint, his very nature, the fact that he taught until several years ago Sunday school, are all to be applauded and looked up to. His presidency besides. Now, that doesn't mean that obviously what he did as president of the United States will not be a part of his legacy. I also would suggest that, sadly, he took political positions regarding world affairs that I think will also be a part of his legacy. I'm thinking primarily about some of his political positions regarding Cuba and Venezuela, amongst others. But all of that can be put aside for a moment. And you think about the man, and you think about the family, and you think about the lives that he's affected through his work with Habitat for Humanity, amongst other organizations, and you want your heart to go out to the Carter family right now. I understand what having a loved one in hospice is like. It is not, I heard it said earlier, well, hospice isn't a death sentence. Well, we've all got a death sentence on our heads. And when you're 98 years old, the time is sooner rather than later, especially when you hear the news about hospice. We'll talk about that, maybe take some of your comments after the news. It's 3:32 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
3:32, I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. Right now, 68 degrees currently in Nashville tonight. Possible showers and a low of 51. Weather and traffic coming up in just a few minutes, starting with President Biden's surprise visit to Kyiv today to meet with Ukrainian President Zelensky. It was coordinated secretly by a select few of the administration, and the Russians were only given a few hours' notice. Biden's trip right before his visit to Poland also happens to be when Russian President Vladimir Putin will address his people tomorrow night. And while the Russians have held back on attacking Kyiv during the U.S. presidential stop, Patrick Reevell tells us Mr. Putin will likely not hold back during his speech.
I think the belief is that it will likely be a very hawkish speech. It will likely be an attempt to rally Russians for a long war, which is what all signs point to try and encourage Russians to really lean into this war and join up and join those mobilization efforts that the Kremlin is also pushing.
Right now, reports say the overall response from the Russians has been fairly muted. The Russian Foreign Ministry has accused Volodymyr Zelensky of, quote, selling his soul to the Americans. Back here in Tennessee, state lawmakers will debate a bill that makes it a crime when something falls out of a truck bed or other vehicle going down the highway.
News Channel 5 says if passed, this bill would continue making not securing the load on your vehicle a misdemeanor. But it's adding a specific offense on someone driving with an unsecured ladder on their bed or trailer. The bill's sponsor says there's special significance behind the bill. It will be named in honor of Deputy Sergeant Chris Jenkins, who died in the line of duty in February of last year when he was hit by a truck while trying to clear a ladder from the interstate in Loudoun County. Sergeant Jenkins had been with the Sheriff's Department for 20 years. Ken Weaver, WTN News.
And the bill is set to go to the House Transportation Committee tomorrow, and it's been referred to the Senate Transportation and Safety Committee. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
Happy President's Day. You know, it's not a favorite holiday. I mean, I think President's Day gets the shaft. I think it gets the shaft for a number of reasons. I think it gets the shaft because it's fairly soon on the heels of all of the holiday time with Thanksgiving and Christmas and all of that. And I think, you know, what is your ranking of hey, Mac Morey, by the way.
Hello, Matt Murphy.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well.
You sound in full song back there. That's nice.
Thank you so much.
I see you're working on a holiday. That's nice, too.
Of course.
Wayne's here. Matt Murphy's here. Mac's here. Bell's not here.
Bell's not here.
Chris Webber's not here. Brian's not here. A lot of people not here, but we're here. I mean, that's what it takes.
That's
what it takes to keep the railroad going on.
Woo!
So let's go ahead and get this out of the way real quick. Let's rank our
okay.
Let's rank our holidays.
Whoa, that's tough.
Let's rank our holidays. So I don't know where President's Day would be.
I know.
I mean, I appreciate our presidents of the United States. Don't get me wrong. I mean,
of course.
How about your presidents? You got a favorite?
No.
Oh, you're going to hide behind the news thing.
Yeah,
you're about to hide behind the news thing because if you say JFK, you say JFK. Oh, he's a Democrat. I knew.
Exactly.
He's a liberal, mainstream media Democrat. Yeah, I get it. Okay. Well, all right. Well, we'll do that later on in the 6 o'clock hour. We're gonna rank our favorite holidays.
I love it.
See where President's Day. Wayne, you can be a part of this as well. We're gonna rank holidays and see where President's Day falls in all of that. Speaking of presidents, I mean, obviously, we think about Jimmy Carter now that it has been announced that he is in hospice care. He has made the decision, and I say good for him, understanding what a faith-based man he is, understanding that he is very clear about how all of this works. Whether we agree with him or not is of no consequence. This man is very clear about where he is and where he's going. And he's 98 years of age, and he has made a decision to not go back to the hospital, to stay at his home, to be surrounded by family and friends. And what that means, whether that means he has a month left on this earth or 6 months or a year, whatever it means, he wants to spend that time with family and friends and not at a hospital somewhere. And I hope that should any of us have to make that decision, that we seem, at least from what we've heard, to be as clear-minded as Jimmy Carter is about it, and that we make that decision at his age, because he has lived a wonderful, wonderful life at the age of 98. Now, there will be a time to reflect on his presidency. There will be, once again, I'm not signing the man's death certificate, but I would think that we have the ability to reflect on this, recognizing that his time on this earth is probably coming to a close fairly soon. Larry's in Clarksville. Let's take a call or two on this subject. Larry, good afternoon. Welcome to The Drive. No Brian Wilson, Matt in for Brian. How are you?
I'm doing well, Matt. I'm breathing. I'm still above the ground. I'm not, below daisies. First, I want my puppy for calling in.
Well, that's a host discretion matter. Now, I appreciate the fact that Larry is following on social media, and on social media, I reminded folks if they call in, they get a puppy. But that is host discretion on the puppy. And you know what? I'm gonna. Well, hold on. We're gonna have a great conversation on the line here, and then at the end of the call, I'll decide puppy or no puppy. How about that?
All right. Thanks, Uncle Joe.
Okay.
No. Listen. I served under Presidents Carter and Reagan, and while I completely disagreed with President Carter's policies, I still think he is a very fine man, and I appreciate everything he's done since he left office. And I went through hospice with my mom. I know how that can be, and I really wouldn't wish it on anybody, but at least if he's in hospice and he's at home with his family, he knows that he is loved, and I have nothing but prayers for him and his family.
Yeah, that's well stated, Larry. And it is important that you and I and others have the ability to separate the politics and the political ideology of the man and the man himself. And I think we sometimes lose that in this world. So I'm not going to give. I'll give you a juxtaposition. I'm not going to give Don Lemon one single bit of grace over the fact that he's about to be fired at CNN because of the way that Don Lemon is, the type of human being he is. I'll give Jimmy Carter a heck of a lot of grace over some of the failures in his presidency because of the type of human being he is. I hope that makes sense.
It absolutely does, and honestly, because I won't be able to say this on the air, I wouldn't do something on Don Lemon if he was on fire.
That was a favored phrase of my grandpa's, Larry. And with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and say it. Larry, you get a puppy. I promised.
That's awesome.
All right, so is it okay if I mail him, though? I have to mail the puppies. Really? I mean, well, it's up to you. I mean, the only way I can do it is mail it. So you tell me if you want it or not. I'll put you on hold there, Larry, and you tell me if you want me to. I got it. That's the way that this goes. So if you want me to mail the puppy, I'll mail the puppy. Promises made, Larry. Promises kept. From Matt Murphy to you. Look for your puppy. It'll be in the mail. I mean, the way the U.S. Postal Service works, what? 4 or 5 days? 4 or 5 days? That should be all right. Tommy is next. Hey, Tommy, how are you?
I'm fine, Matt. I live down here on the southern border of Tennessee and listen to you every day and enjoy it very much. Enjoyed Pamela today. What I consider Jimmy Carter, and if you were, I don't know how old you are, but if you were alive in 76, you would know that the Mitch McConnell of 76 was Tip O'Neill, who would not let Jimmy Carter do anything in his own party. And I really think Jimmy Carter, just what he did with the Middle East, with Menachem Begin and Yasser Arafat, and getting them to sit down together, and I think it changed everything to this day. And I consider him one of the best presidents we ever had. He just didn't have a party. Even his own Democratic Party wouldn't do anything with him because he was a member of the swamp, or he hated the swamp, or didn't want to be a part of the swamp, just like Donald Trump, whom I consider the best president we ever had, just for what he got done while he was in there. And nobody gave you as stopped abortion since Jimmy Carter was even in there. So it goes back, I go back to Eisenhower, and I consider Melania and I consider Rosalind to be probably one of the best women, president's wives that we ever had. And I think Jimmy Carter's a class act, and I appreciate him very much and hope he gets through this and goes on to meet his beautiful maker. Thank you, man.
Thank you, Tommy, for the call. Tommy, I'm fascinated. I'm not judging this call at all. I mean, each man's opinion is his own, and I'm not going to make a matter of opinion into a matter of fact. I'm not going to make a matter of taste into a matter of fact. I think we do that far too much in this world. I will say that I did not begin the show today on the drive at 3 o'clock thinking that I would get a call telling me the two finest presidents, in someone's opinion, in the modern era at least, would be Donald Trump and Jimmy Carter. Those would seem to be polar opposites, but I guess I kind of understand the connective tissue for you, Tommy, in as much as you said it, that they were both political outsiders. They were both rejected by broad swaths of their own political party, to say the least, the opposing political party. And they were both set up to a certain degree for failure. Now, I'll just leave it at that. I could argue some of the points on his presidency, but I was 3 years old in 1976. So I'm not going to presume to understand in real time what was going on in 1976, 1977, more than someone who was socially and politically aware at the time. I know that my research in terms of history indicates that while the Begin-Arafat summit proved successful in many ways, it was an absolute failure, especially as Arafat consistently violated terms of the agreement. But be that as it may, I appreciate the perspective. It's one that I've never thought of, honestly. I've never thought of Jimmy Carter because Jimmy Carter was never the accepted candidate in D.C. for the Democrats. He was a political outsider. He was a knuckle-dragging, you know what grinning peanut farmer from Georgia. that had the audacity to win its party's nomination. And so a lot of the political establishment just looked at him as a dunderhead, beginning, middle, and end of his presidency. And that's the Democrats. I'm not even thinking about the Republican Party and how they treated him. Never thought of it that way, but I appreciate the perspective. It's 3:50 on Supertalk 99.7 WTN. When we return, your reflections on the presidency of Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter is in hospice. He's still with us. One would presume he is in Plains, Georgia as we speak, getting rest, relaxing, and spending time with his family. He just announced over the weekend, for those just joining us, that he would not be receiving any further medical care outside of basic hospice care in his home. My mother went through hospice care toward the end of her life. My mother, for those unfamiliar with my midday show, or if you've not heard me tell this story, Mama died when she was 53 years old after a long struggle as a result of a brain tumor that was taken out when she was 28. She spent about the last 10 years of her life thereabouts in a assisted living facility, and eventually she had a stroke, which led to some decisions amongst the family, and I've told these stories in the past. I won't belabor them now, but we eventually turned to hospice care, and they were fabulous. The hospice care was actually we got an outside agency to help in a more continuous fashion because we did not expect that the assisted living facility would have the staff necessary to take care of Mama for the level that she needed, for the time that she needed. And I cannot tell you what, I mean, I know each hospice organization is a little bit different, but I'll tell you my experience in just a moment. Anyone that's gone through it understands that these are absolute angels on earth. I know that there are exceptions to every rule, but as a rule, these folks are just fabulous, fabulous people that are so comforting in the worst times, in the worst of times. It is 3:53 on Supertalk 99.7 WTN.
Hi, I'm Paul Winkler. I've been teaching investing on Nashville airwaves for over 20 years with the Investor Coaching Show. And in that time, I taught a lot about how markets work and how we invest money and academic principles of investing money. But I've also talked an awful lot about how to avoid the mistakes that people often make with their money. Think about it. A lot of people sold out of the market at the worst time when COVID struck, or when TARP happened, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, or gold, they invested in that at the worst time. Bailing out of the market because they were worried about Y2K or 9/11 or jumping into energy stocks or jumping into cryptocurrency. One of the things that I like to do is educate investors because I believe that the more educated you are, the more confident you are, and the more confident you are, the more successful you can be as an investor. Now, I not only do that on our radio show, but we do that in our offices around the Nashville region, 10 offices. To learn more about our approach to investing and financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call, or you can call 615-851-1950.
have a show to do today. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Let me see if I can do this. If you're watching on the tube, let me see if I can do this. Hold on. That's pretty good.
They're missing it. They're not getting it.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, I'm throwing things at the camera. All right, Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Matt Murphy, I'm in for Brian Wilson. I'm not replacing Brian Wilson in any stretch of the imagination. Brian will be back tomorrow. He's taking President's Day off. Coming up in just a moment, we will speak with Brink Fiddler. Brink's become a friend of mine. He is my go-to resource when it comes to all questions regarding law enforcement, tactical operations within a police department. And I'm going to ask him about some of the stuff we saw over the weekend regarding Austin, Texas. There was an incident in Memphis, Tennessee. I cannot imagine how the rest of the police department in Memphis is reacting today to what has been going on with the police there and how to deal with the crime issues that still exist in that city. We're going to talk to him about all these things coming up in just a couple of minutes. Right now, it's 4 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Oh, yeah. A little picking and grinning. Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
.402, I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. Right now, 68 degrees. Could see some possible rain here later on tonight. The lows in the 50-51 area. Weather and traffic coming up in just a few minutes. President Biden's surprise visit to Ukraine is not sitting well with some Republicans on Capitol Hill. Faith Abube walks us through it.
Alabama Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville wrote that the president, quote, has now spent more time in Ukraine than he has at our southern border. Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley also blasted the president for visiting the war zone instead of East Palestine, Ohio, where train derailment has raised concerns about air pollution. Despite the criticism, President Biden has earned strong bipartisan support for the trip, including from Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell and Senator Lindsey Graham, who says it was the right signal to send at the right time.
Senior administration officials say the U.S. alerted Russia to President Biden's visit, giving Moscow a stern warning as the commander-in-chief touched down in Ukraine. And here in Nashville, Metro Police say it was a random shooting that took the life of a woman in East Nashville last night.
News 2 citing court records which show a bullet went through the woman's bathroom window through a shampoo bottle that was sitting on a window sill and then went through a shower curtain before fatally striking her in the James Casey housing complex. 40-year-old man taken into custody after Metro Police looked at surveillance video they say shows him exiting the residence across from the victim's residence, then firing a gun toward the victim's residence, then stepping back inside. Montez DeQuan Dennis is being held without bond on a criminal homicide charge. Ken Weaver, WTN News.
And President's Day. Today's the holiday where we celebrate all of our commander-in-chiefs in U.S. history and have three have called Tennessee home. Andrew Jackson, the 7th president, called Hermitage his home. James K. Polk, the 11th president of the United States, also served as governor of Tennessee. He's buried at Tennessee State Capitol. And Andrew Johnson, the 17th president of the state, also was the governor of the volunteer state for some time before serving as president. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Morey, WTN News.
All right, kids, here we are. Here we go. It is hour number 2 of The Drive. No Brian Wilson today. Matt Murphy in for Brian, 408. Thank you for being a part of the show. Whatever time you're able to give us, we're appreciative. If you're driving home, it's pretty nasty in some and certain areas, even though it is a holiday for some of you. The typical nonsense going on downtown, and there's a quag toward the airport. If you're heading 40 eastbound toward the airport, just beyond the airport, just beyond, I guess, right beyond, what is that, Donaldson Pike. between Donaldson Pike and, let's show off my knowledge, what is that, Central Pike? Yeah, Donaldson Pike and Central Pike. It is all black on the screen, which means there's a huge backup due to an accident. Coming to us from that accident is just past Old Hickory Boulevard. So I would encourage whatever alternate route you can discover beyond 40 eastbound if that's the way you're heading. All right, we've lots to do. We will get into the matter of Donald Trump going after Ron DeSantis in the 5 o'clock hour. We'll talk with Robbie Starbuck about the gender mutilation bill that's running through the General Assembly at 5:30 this afternoon. Joe Biden went to Ukraine to avoid facing what I think is his own citizens in East Palestine, Ohio. I have an update there, and there is a report, and I just had this pulled up on my phone, and I'll need to re-pull it. There was a report of a breaking news story in Ohio where, let's see, there's a mass casualty incident that has been reported in Benton, Ohio. So we're on the lookout for that. It's an explosion at an Ohio metal facility. And then there's this. The Attorney General, wow, this is a pretty huge story that just broke moments ago, and thank you, hat tip to Pamela Furr for throwing this at me. The Attorney General of the state of Tennessee, Jonathan Skrmetti, has opened a criminal investigation into Nashville District Attorney Glenn Funk following a series of disclosures by News Channel 5. In a letter delivered last week, the AG's office notified Funk they are, quote, investigating whether any official in your office has violated criminal law. News Channel 5 obtained that letter through a public records request. While not precluding other areas of concern, the letter details a specific interest by Skrmetti's office into whether anyone on Funk's team violated the state's wiretapping statute by installing listening devices in or around the DA's office in downtown Nashville. The existence of those devices was first revealed by News Channel 5. The letter instructs the Nashville Democrat to preserve all evidence regarding the purchase, installation, maintenance, and operation of recording devices, as well as audio recordings themselves and any communications about those recordings. Skrmetti's notice came days after the team at News Channel 5 revealed that Funk's team had installed listening devices in areas around the DA's office capable of picking up conversations of employees and visitors who were not warned that they were being recorded. In a written statement, Funk's office did not dispute the findings. Instead, they insisted it was a necessary part of office security and that there was, quote, no reasonable expectation of privacy for conversations in public places. Others pointed to federal and state statutes that make it a crime to record conversations of unsuspecting individuals. Yeah, I mean, it is well established. In every state in the United States, let me just get off the story from News Channel 5 for a moment. In every state of the United States of America, it is legal for you to record a conversation if at least one of the parties involved in the conversation knows that the recording is going on. In a lot of states, both parties have to be aware that the recording is going on. There is no state in the United States of America that allows for a private conversation to be recorded without the knowledge of at least one of the participants, particularly the DA of Nashville should know that. So that story just breaking moments ago from News Channel 5. We wanted to get it to you as quickly as possible. All right, to speak on matters involving law and law enforcement, I lean on Brink Fiddler, although now that I've met Tracy, I should say it a different way. But we'll just start with, we'll do it alphabetical order. I just want to make sure that I remember her last name. And right now it's, is it Mendelson? Damn it. Is it Mendenhall? I'm just trying to turn on my own microphones. Tracy Mendenhall joins us with Brink Fiddler in tow. Hey, Brink, how are you? Hey, Tracy, I remembered your first name. I don't know. How's it going? Good. Thank you guys for coming in from Defend Systems, of course. And I talk good about these folks, not just because they pay me to, but because I love them and I believe in the way that they do their business. And I encourage, if you're a decision maker, I wasn't here to do a spot today, but if you're a decision maker with regard to a school, a church, or a place of business, you need these folks in your lives. And thank you for that. Yeah, appreciate it. Let's talk for a moment about your understanding of, I'm not asking you to comment on the specifics of the story, but as former LEOs, were you ever involved in wiretapping at all?
Most of our cases were wiretap cases, yeah.
Because you were in the drug task force, right?
Yeah, at that level, when you're talking Class A felony narcotics, I mean, that's the level of case you have to even get a wiretap case, right? Because it's pretty invasive. It's the highest scrutinized court order you can get because there's nothing quite as invasive as listening to someone's conversations.
Private conversations without their knowledge. Right. So what you would do, and this goes toward what I was saying, that in order for the average Joe citizen to legally record a conversation, and I bet you guys can tell me Tennessee's statute, but I know in every state in the union, at least one of the people involved in the conversation, without going to a court and getting a court order, one of the participants has to be knowledgeable that the conversation is being recorded, right?
That's right. Tennessee's a one-party state.
Okay, so if you and I were talking on the phone and I decided to record us for whatever reason, not that I've done this, Brink, but if I ever decided to do that, I mean, that would be permissible in the state of Tennessee as long as, there's only two. I guess, could there be multiple people outside of the two of us if Tracy were involved in the?
Yeah, it's still back to a one-party. So
Okay.
One party involved knows. So back several years ago, there was a former police officer that got indicted federally for this, and he put listening devices in at the FOP camp. It was the whole thing, and he went to the federal penitentiary for doing the exact same thing. And that's putting devices in to listen to a third-party conversation without their effective consent.
Well, I just saw this story break across. I don't know if the DA has, some sort of further explanation as to why he was recording these conversations and what he considers to be public arenas. It remains to be seen. But regardless of who you are, if you wanted to record the conversation between Brink and Matt Murphy, and neither Brink nor Matt Murphy would be privy to the knowledge, it's your understanding you would have to go to a court and get a court order, right?
That's exactly. It's not just my understanding. That's a fact. Yeah, that's what we did. That's what I did for a living.
Did you ever get turned down?
Yes, we did actually. We knew what level of proof we needed, right? But the statute's very clear, and we never got turned down by a judge. Our prosecutor that was assigned to us would oftentimes want us to have a little bit more than we had. Even though we felt like it was plenty, he didn't want it to be plenty. He wanted it to be slam dunk, right?
Right.
Because there is no higher invasion of someone's privacy than listening to their conversations without them knowing about it, right? I guess you could put cameras in their house, but I do find it interesting in that story, though. A side note that the AG's office is investigating. I guess it's the same AG's office that represented them, represented the DA's office in the past. So and I guess it just depends on who's involved, really, and whether or not they conflict out. But obviously, the same people can't be involved.
There's an attorney quoted in this story, and I just want to quote him and get your take on this. A person who tries to record something privately, no matter what the motivation behind the recording, is in violation of the law. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, is that Gary Blackburn?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So the accusation here is that the DA's office knowingly was recording individuals, that the letter instructs the Nashville Democrat to preserve all evidence, quote, regarding the purchase, installation, maintenance, and operation of recording devices, as well as the audio recordings themselves and any communications about those recordings. I assume this happened in his office. So I guess I'm just trying to work this out in real time. If I'm sitting in my office and you come in my office and I'm recording, I think we're in compliance with the law.
Yep.
But if I leave and Tracy comes in and then you guys have a private conversation, or you guys have a conversation while I'm gone, the guy that knows the recording is happening, and then I come back, that conversation that you had, that's off. I mean, that's out of bounds, isn't it?
Against the law, yes. 100%.
And so it sounds like, at least on initial blush, that's kind of what he's hiding behind, is that you have no presumption that you're not being recorded in the DA's office.
There's a lot of defense out there about reasonable expectation of privacy, right? This is where the whole thing about LPR, license plate recognition, came up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you have a reasonable expectation of privacy driving down the street that somebody can't see your tag? Well, of course, the answer is no, right? So that's that argument is made a lot, but the statute's very specific. It doesn't matter what opinions are about where a reasonable expectation of privacy is. You cannot record a conversation between two parties without at least one party being aware that is occurring in the story.
Well, that's breaking news, and we'll continue to cover that for you on Super Talk 99.7 WTN as more info comes out and becomes available. And good work for News Channel 5 getting to the bottom of some of those recordings. Obviously, there was a tip going on, and they acted on that tip. And it's come to this, where the Attorney General, if you're just joining us, the Attorney General is demanding all evidence be preserved in that while they investigate whether or not the law has been violated on the part of the district attorney in Nashville, Glenn Funk. So let's I noted a couple of things that I wanted to talk to you guys about. First, I want to start with what should be the easiest. I saw over the weekend, Austin, Texas, this there were several videos being shot about street racing or these street racing things. I've seen a couple of them that reportedly happen in Nashville. Do we have street racing going on in Nashville?
Yes, we do.
All right, talk to me. What is the nature of this? What is the Tracy? What is the genesis of this? I mean, guys want to show off their cars.
It's what it seems to be, right? Like before I left the police department, there was a overtime initiative that we all had to work, you had to sign up for, and it was plainclothes, and you went to these high-profile areas where these street races were going to. They would shut down intersections. They would go to these major parking lots, shut down traffic, do all kinds of things. And so there was constantly more, as if there's not already enough mandates on the police department. This was another one that was added because these guys want to take over the roads.
I mean, so it's a very loosely structured, loosely organized, for lack of a better word, competition amongst people that come together and want to show off their rides and how fast they are, how they can do donuts, and they do tricks in their cars or whatever, but they're doing it on public streets.
Yes.
What do you as a police department do about that? I mean, when you were in the department.
Overtime initiatives, I guess.
Yes.
I mean,
About it. You show a presence. I mean, that was the whole point, was for there to be extra police. We would go to the places where they thought they were, or we thought they were going to be. There was a whole list that we worked off of. And for 13 hours that night, you went from place to place to see if they were there.
you just set a patrol car there and hope that your presence there as they approach the area would be enough to deter them from doing this. Well, that's not what I saw in Austin, Texas. In Austin, Texas, I guess they got there first. The police came in to try to break it up, and Joe Q. Citizen said, no, we're not going to break it up, and the police had to stand down. How scary of a concept is that? That a police unit or two or three or four get to a place where there's a large assembled mass of people, and the people say, no, we're not going to follow the law. You just need to go on home. And it seemed to me in the video I saw, the police said, well, we don't have the backup. We don't have the ability to do anything other than escalate this situation into something that could be even worse. And so they stood down.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If you're that outnumbered, right, with an unruly crowd, we saw it a lot during all the riots and everything, right? You have to make tactical decisions in that moment about what's more important, right? Your safety, you're getting a bunch of idiots to stop acting like a bunch of idiots, right? And so, in that situation, nobody's life was in danger, if you will, or things like that, so that we weren't at a level of using lethal force. Now, if 8 people start to approach me and threaten to kick my butt as a police officer, well, now it is a lethal force situation.
Right.
8 on 1, and I can start. But what does that look like on video, right? A police officer shooting 8 unarmed people that are walking towards him. Can you do it? Well, sure, right, if you feel like your life's in danger, but at some point you just got to make a tactical decision. And in this case, that's what they did. They just made the best decision based on manpower that they had. I wouldn't have taken on a crowd like that with 4 of us either. It's crazy, right? I mean, but I would have called SRT and brought them in. It was our full-time SWAT team, and then absolutely would have handled it.
Are these things being organized online, I guess, I assume?
I think so. I'm not sure. I know that I only had to work at one time, which I was pretty glad about.
I can imagine.
So my guess would be there, Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, that's how people get in groups now.
I mean, I'm trying to understand the thought process of people that are doing this, right? And the best that I can come up with is that there were times in my teenage years in, my 20s that we would go to, we'd go to somebody's field and have a field party. And, if we were ever busted, we would say, well, we're not hurting anybody. We're just having a good time. We're not messing with anybody. And we're going to go home. And the police didn't want to hear it because we're on private property or whatever. You're escalating that to they're literally shutting down roads. And I don't know what they're thinking is that they can just jump in their cars and leave if enough police officers get there to break it up.
Yeah, because that's what they do. As soon as they see enough police officers there, they take off. And it does not happen in Davidson County.
You don't chase them. Right.
You don't chase cars. So they go to the next place.
What would give an officer in the Metro Nashville Police Department the authority? I mean, do you have to get a supervisor's say-so in order to pursue?
Every supervisor, the person's supervisor and a supervisor that's listening to the air has to approve the pursuit.
What has it been your experience would it take to get that approval?
Well, the test is does what the person's wanted for, and does the risk to public safety by nature of the person being still in society outweigh the risk posed to the public for a vehicle pursuit?
Hey, hold your thought there. It's 425. I apologize. And if we're I'm just looking up on the super text line. If we're having technical difficulties, I apologize for that. I'll try to figure that out. I'm late for a break. Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Nashville District Attorney Glenn Funk now being investigated by Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti for possibly violating the state's wiretapping statute. That and more at 4:30. Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Thank you, Mac Maury. It is 4:29, Super Talk 99.7 WTN. We'll get to Mac Maury momentarily. Wayne, I hate to produce on air, but you don't have to turn me up to turn them up. And I think you're turning me up, and in addition to them, we're trying to get some audio issues worked out as we have two guests in studio, one of whom I cannot remember her name. The other's Brink Fiddler. Don't say it. Don't say it. You're a highlight of my day right now. It's no reflection on you. It's a reflection on how horrible of a human being I am. This is all about how horrible I am, not about you.
You have to come back, please.
All right, do you remember her name, Mac?
Melanie. I'm just kidding.
Mendenhall. I got Mendenhall now.
I was just kidding. It was the bit. It was part of the bit.
It was a part of the bit. Her name's Heidi. It's funny, right? It's funny. It's funny because she's going to come over the counter and kill me.
Exactly.
Did I really? That's pretty apropos, though. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I mean, that's pretty appropriate. I mean, if you guys were in a lineup and I said, hey, the tall dude, that's cornbread and there's strawberry cake, people would go, yeah, I get that. I understand that completely. All right, quick time out. We're going to repair relations in studio, and we'll be back in a moment to talk about TECC. I remember that is the Tactical Emergency Casualty Care Course happening at Glock Store, Nashville. I think, are you full? Are you full? Oh, well, boy, oh, boy. You got to get on top of this. We'll talk about it in just a moment right after the news on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
4:31, I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. Right now, 69 degrees in Nashville. Weather and traffic coming up in just a few minutes. Starting right now with a breaking news story from Channel 5. The Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti has opened up a criminal investigation into Nashville District Attorney Glenn Funk's office. They notified Funk that they are, quote, investigating whether any official in your law has violated any criminal law, end quote, specifically the state's wiretapping statute, seeing if they've installed listening devices around the DA's office in downtown Nashville. This all comes after News Channel 5 had uncovered that Funk and his team did have some listening devices around the office. Funk's office did not argue that investigation, rather said, quote, there is no reasonable expectation of privacy for conversations in public places, end quote. Others have said that unknowingly recording individuals in a place they think they're alone is illegal. The Channel 5 investigation also looked into other things, including a part-time employee that Funk paid $75,000 a year with little evidence of how the man earned that salary. Evidence shows that timesheets don't add up to what the employee submitted for the paycheck. And going over to some money news, here's Daria Albinger.
It's a short week for the markets, which took Monday off to celebrate President's Day. This is traditionally a good day for sales, especially for bigger ticket items, from cars to mattresses to home appliances. You may want to compare the deals that are offered by online and brick and mortar stores if you're planning to make a purchase. Wall Street will reopen for business as usual on Tuesday. Earnings season rolls on this week. We're going to hear from some of the nation's biggest retailers, including Home Depot, Walmart, and TJX as they report on their holiday quarter and the performance in the face of persistent inflation. Also look for the latest earnings from eBay, Etsy, Square, and Warner Discovery. Microsoft will try to save its $69 billion bid to buy Activision Blizzard this week. The company has come under fire from U.S. and EU regulators who are worried that the deal could give Microsoft an unfair share of the tech market.
And that is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
It is Super Talk 99.7 WT. You're so lucky. Tracy Mendenhall's so lucky because we've not set up that third shot yet. You can find us on TV. Brink Fiddler's right there on the television right now. Tracy, you're not.
Oh, darn.
You're not, but Tracy's here. I mean, Oh, actually, that'd be good right there. You just come and just do that right.
No, leave it where it's at.
There it goes. Oh, it was absolutely that didn't work. I don't know why that didn't work, but it didn't work. All right, so we're talking TECC, but before we go there, I want to talk to you about MSU, the Michigan State University shooting that happened last week. Your thoughts?
Well, again, another situation where literally just a total random person with obviously extreme mental illness decided to kill some people. I mean, the guy was 43 years old, had zero connection to any of those students or that university at all, right? Much like the Seattle Pacific University shooting, and it's not. People think it's going to be somebody or workplace violence related, but a lot of times it is a total random with nothing more of a motive than they are just become homicidal, right? For whatever reason, we already have a mental health crisis in this country. So, I did see footage. It was an interview of two students that were trying to get people in their building to lock down, and she said that these ladies just kept in the kitchen, just kept doing dishes like it wasn't real, right? Like people, they're happening so frequently that the sting wears off. Is what I say, but people don't take them as seriously, or it's just we're so desensitized to violence now, right? And so people aren't responding the way they should, and as a result, we're getting more and more victims. I don't know what the three people that were killed. I don't know what their wounds looked like and whether or not they were treatable or not. But back to just a little bit of a medical training, right? May or may not be able to fix some of these, at least mitigate some of the damage.
Is it an increasing problem? I know it's an issue, but would you say some of this is a problem with gun-free zones? And the reason I bring this up, I don't want to presume to understand what's going through the mind of a mentally deranged person, but why would he, absent any other connection, gravitate to the university outside of that? That it's a target-rich environment, and the lack of shooting back is probably probable as well.
So I know that argument's out there about soft targets, and yes, we have seen several soft targets get hit, and does that play a role? I would guess. I would think so. But we've also seen targets, especially in schools, where they do have a school resource officer. The shooter knows they have a school resource officer, and they're coming to do it anyway because that's just the way it is. But I think certainly if they felt like the minute they walked in the door and fired one shot at a student that 12 others were going to stand up and shoot them to the pavement, that they'd probably go somewhere else.
That just makes sense. We've seen, and I want to ask you guys about this before we get into TECC2. I saw a story about a nightclub shooting in Memphis, which is not necessarily, sadly, headline making, except it comes in the aftermath of all of what went down with the 5 police officers. Can you try to put the listening audience and Matt Murphy in the mindset of what's going on in that department right now? I can't imagine because the morale has to be low, certainly shaken, if not very low. I don't know what leadership's like, and I'm not asking you to presume that you do either unless you have some intimate knowledge. But I can't imagine putting myself in the place of a police officer that puts on the uniform and goes out on a nightly basis and has to deal with some of the rough and tumble things that police officers have to deal with. That's one thing. But then to do that in Memphis with what I would presume would be not a very cop-friendly attitude amongst the general population right now, it has to be incredibly difficult doing the job right now in Memphis, Tennessee.
I would agree with that. Police work is just messy, especially use of force. Even done properly, use of force is just, it's not pretty. Tracy, worked in our confrontation management division of the police training academy, and that's just what it sounds like, confrontation management, like dealing with how we fight and shoot and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, there are techniques where we can try and mitigate how bad it looks, but at the end of the day, if you have to fight somebody to get them into custody, that's just not a pretty thing. So and we talked about this before, the thing that really disturbs me in Memphis, though, was the brazenness for which they did that, knowing it was on body cam, just leads me to assume this is not their first rodeo, and they weren't the least bit worried about it being on body cam and their supervisor seeing it, right? I mean, obviously they weren't worried about that. So, you know, and I'm not saying by any means it's par for the course for that agency, but I would say the Department of Justice is, I'm sure, going to swoop in there and with a, very fine-tooth comb start going through all that stuff, and who knows what they're going to find. It would be a very difficult place to operate.
I mean, in speaking broadly, and Tracy, you can speak to this or you, Brink, but speaking broadly, if you were asked to investigate a situation and you recognize that it did not seem like the individuals accused cared about their cameras being on, cared about their actions while cameras were on. I mean, I've never been involved in police work, but that would lead me to believe that we have some broader issues. We have some issues with either supervisors being involved or having knowledge of this, or no supervisors being really present in terms of what's actually going on within the department.
I agree with that. If you don't think you have if there's nobody holding you accountable for your actions, if you know that you have a supervisor that is going to not watch body cam footage or doesn't care what you do on your body cam footage, and they're just going to swipe it under the rug, then why would you give a crap what's on your body cam footage?
Yeah, you wouldn't. I mean, those guys clearly, this wasn't their first rodeo, and they didn't give it a second thought that it was on body cam until towards the end, right, when they start saying all that.
Well, it was like there was a point where they decided, okay, let's clean all this up, and let's start.
Damage they done to the guy. I think at that point when they saw what was happening with him from a medical standpoint, I think that's when they started to obviously panic.
Well, and here's the sad reality, and here's where I suppose I can understand where some of the suspicion is, especially when you're talking about a lack of supervision, that if Tyree Nichols did not die, we never would have heard about this. But it was because of his death that the authorities really took a deep dive and started demanding body cam, demanding some of the evidence that led us to the full understanding of what happened. And maybe even if there is a question or an investigation, maybe some officers get suspended for a time for doing this or that wrong, but certainly not to this level. And that's what's frightening, that a few of those random and rare bad apples can create such a dynamic. And this is the reason that I bring Memphis up, because I am certain that the vast majority of the people that are putting on the uniform in Memphis, Tennessee, just want to get home to their families and do right by their community, but they're left having to deal with the aftermath of all of this.
Every police officer across the country is left with the aftermath. It's not just Memphis. Like, now, if you're a civilian and you've seen that video of these cops beating this guy to death, you think that every cop on the street acts that way. And unfortunately, that's not the case, right? Like, there's a few bad apples, but now you're put in this box because you wear a gun and a badge every day.
I've said for a long time when I speak at public events and on air that I do not know of a group of people more determined to root out those bad apples than the good cops that are on the force every day, because their jobs are so much exponentially harder as a result. Tell me about TECC. What is this?
Tactical Emergency Casualty Care. We're doing it at Glocksville this Friday and Saturday, as you know, because you're going to be there. It's a 2-day, 16-hour kind of combat medical course. It's the civilian and law enforcement version of what's called Tactical Combat Casualty Care. But it comes with a 4-year certification from NAEMT. It's a very intense pre-hospital trauma medical course. It is not for everyone, in that we make it as real as we can make it. You will be exposed to video that is very real. So, it's not for everybody. But I will say this and brag on the Department of Metro Police and Tracy for a minute. So, Metro Police started this program out at the Training Academy in the fall of 2018. Tracy ran that program, and now I got him. Stephen Waterman runs it, who's also a good friend and a medic. And Vanderbilt tracks that program and treatments and saves and all that kind of stuff. And last check with Waterman, we were close to 400 people in Nashville-Davidson County that have been saved. Their lives have been saved by Metro police officers, not treated, saved, because of this program and the pre-hospital care And what that changes the dynamic is law enforcement's always there first. They always beat EMS there, right? And then now they have the ability to stop a massive hemorrhage and do all those things and get them ready for EMS. So when EMS is showing up, they're not the pre-hospital care is done. You've maintained an airway, you've stopped massive hemorrhaging, you've done the stuff to save their life, and now they just get them to a hospital. So, that's an untold story about the police department. I think the police department needs to do a better job of bragging on the good stuff that they do, and that's an amazing thing they've done, and Tracy was a big part of spearheading.
And a lot of times with the police officers, you're flipping that switch where many times the individuals whose life you're saving is a person that you were just trying to apprehend and was aggressively trying to prevent that apprehension, right? I mean that ability to shift those gears is just astronomical. It's incredible. All right, so you've got 1 or 2 seats left?
Yeah, I can't remember if it's 1 or 2. We were just talking about that, but we do have 1 or 2 seats left. Yeah, we'd love to have you. It's a life skill thing. I went through the course as a student years ago, and you leave there with a pre-hospital and trauma life-saving ability like you can't believe. Like your confidence level and your ability to do that is pretty high when you leave. Plus, a lot of people like that 4-year certification, right, from NAMC.
I'm excited about it. Don't embarrass the radio guy, though. I can't impress upon you, Tracy Mendenhall, enough not to embarrass the radio guy.
If you could remember my name, maybe it wouldn't have been as bad for you.
I'd say I've said it right twice. I called her Mickenhouse or something,
Big trouble. That's a promise.
I look forward to it enough that I'm taking the day, and forgive me, folks, in my normal noon to 3 capacity. I'm taking the day on Friday instead of today, President's Day, in order to be there because I'm very excited about it. Don'tBleedOut.com, right?
That's right.
All right. I look forward to that. Look forward to having you back just anytime. Let's get together without these negative things coming into our lives, okay?
Amen.
Tracy Mendenhall and Frank Fiddler. We'll be back in a moment.
Hi, I'm Paul Winkler. I've been teaching investing on Nashville airwaves for over 20 years with the Investor Coaching Show. And in that time, I taught a lot about how markets work and how we invest money and academic principles of investing money. But I've also talked an awful lot about how to avoid the mistakes that people often make with their money. Think about it. A lot of people sold out of the market at the worst time when COVID struck, or when TARP happened, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, or gold, they invested in that at the worst time. Bailing out of the market because they were worried about Y2K or 9/11 or jumping into energy stocks or jumping into cryptocurrency. One of the things that I like to do is educate investors because I believe that the more educated you are, the more confident you are, and the more confident you are, the more successful you can be as an investor. Now, I not only do that on our radio show, but we do that in our offices around the Nashville region, 10 offices. To learn more about our approach to investing and financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call. Or you can call 615-851-1950.
It's 5 o'clock. I'm Mac Morey with your top stories. Right now, 68 degrees in Nashville. Chance for some showers here later on tonight, but it'll stay around the same temperature. Weather and traffic coming up just a few minutes away. Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Scarametti has opened up a criminal investigation into Nashville District Attorney Glenn Funk's office. They notified Funk that they're investigating whether any official in your office has violated any criminal law, specifically the state's wiretapping statute, to see if they've installed any listening devices around the DA's office. This all comes after News Channel 5 had uncovered that Funk and his team did have some listening devices around the office, but Funk's office did not argue that investigation, rather said, quote, there is no reasonable expectation of privacy for conversations in public places, end quote. Others have said that unknowingly recording individuals in a place they think they're alone is illegal. The Channel 5 investigation also looked into some other things about the office, including a part-time employee that Funk paid $75,000 a year with little evidence of how the man earned that salary. Some evidence shows that the timesheets don't add up to what the employee submitted for the paycheck. And in Turkey, just as Turkish and Syrian rescue teams were winding down their operations after the recent 7.8 magnitude earthquake, another huge quake hit the same area between the two countries. So far, at least 8 injured in southern Turkey and at least 30 in northern Syria. Though those initial numbers are sure to rise. This new quake coming during the visit of Secretary of State Antony Blinken to Turkey, where he praised the quick U.S. response to the quake on February 6th. That has killed over 45,000. Here's Jordana Miller.
Survivors of the devastating earthquake just 2 weeks ago in southern Turkey reliving their trauma as the ground began violently shaking around 8 p.m. local time. A new 6.3 magnitude quake striking with its epicenter in the already hard-hit Hatay province. The mayor there says a number of buildings have collapsed, trapping people inside. And like the first massive quake, northern Syria impacted with both regime and rebel-held areas, reporting buildings have come down and dozens are injured.
In a woman's sentence, News 2 says that 25-year-old Leanne Seeley was arrested yesterday for vehicular homicide by intoxication after claiming 28-year-old Tremel Lewis's life. He was the passenger in that crash. It happened last September. She was driving into oncoming traffic, hit a Nissan head-on. Both people inside of that Nissan had seatbelts on and survived the crash without any critical injuries. Seeley and Lewis did not have seatbelts on, and Lewis died from his injuries at the hospital later. Officers found that Seeley had marijuana in her system at the time of that collision. And that is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Morey, WTN News.
right, it is The Drive. No Brian Wilson today. Matt Murphy in for Brian. Happy President's Day, 5:06, and a good afternoon. Hope your drive is going well. And I can tell you from looking at the map, if you're in certain places in and around the metro area of Nashville, your drive's not going very well. I'll run some of that down for you as I can. Let me pull up the map here in just a moment. After I tell you, you're invited to be a part of the show, 615-737-9986. 615-737-WWTN, either via phone. I open up the phone lines all show long, or via the super text line or any other way that you want to communicate with us. We appreciate you being around on President's Day. Brian Wilson back tomorrow. I'll be back in my normal position from noon until 3 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN, and thanks to Pamela Furr for filling in during that time today. So a couple of breaking news stories, and we'll get back to the biggest national, maybe even the biggest international story of the day, and that is the decision on the part of the President of the United States to head over to Ukraine. To my knowledge, he has now spent more time as president in Ukraine. I think I have this math right. I was trying to do it in my head during the break. I believe it is the case that Joe Biden spent more time in Kyiv than he did at the southern border in the United States of America. I think I have that right. It is close, but I think he extended his time just enough in Ukraine where he now has spent more time in that country and certainly has spent more of his mental and actual resources on that country than he ever has at the southern border in our country. Understand something in a very real way. The President of the United States of America cares more about securing the border of Ukraine than he does securing the border of the United States of America. That is not hyperbole by a radio talk show host in Nashville. It is a fact. It is a fact. It is also a fact that there are several areas in and around the Nashville area, and I don't know what our President's Day holiday traffic situation is in terms of us telling you what's going on the roadways. And with that in mind, I just want to double down on a couple of these. 65 South coming out of downtown Nashville, out of the loop, is an absolute piece of garbage. More so than it normally would be, I think, at this time of day because of two accidents coming directly out of the loop. There's one, a disabled vehicle, actually, right on the southern tip of the loop, right at 65 South, which is causing a quag. And if I say some of this a little wrong, I apologize. I've only been here 15 months. My apologies on some of these markers. There's also some police activity at mile marker 82, which was reported about 20 minutes ago. So there's that going on. Then 40 eastbound, heading out toward Mount Juliet and Lebanon. This is after 24 and 40 split. Obviously, that's always a quagmire at this time of day. There's some particular interest right after the airport. Everything slows to a crawl, and that is going that's outbound, or that's eastward toward Mount Juliet. Right there at the dam and whatnot. There's an accident that has been causing a problem all afternoon long. It was reported. Gosh, it was reported at 3:00. And what have you got over there, McMorey?
Yeah, it's an overturned vehicle. We've heard that it's a minivan. We don't have a lot of information right now, but it's Hermitage exit 221A, right where you were talking about, headed eastbound.
All right, so just be on the lookout for that if you're out and about, and there's the normal delays this time of day on the drive. The breaking news story of note locally is a story that hit right around the time that we came on the airwaves, and it involves the district attorney in Nashville, Glenn Funk, and the relatively new Attorney General, Jonathan Skrmetti. Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti has opened a criminal investigation into Nashville District Attorney Glenn Funk and his office following a series of disclosures by News Channel 5. News Channel 5 and News Channel 5 Investigates, hat tip to them, they do great work over there, had already disclosed the fact that there were cameras and audio recording equipment within the district attorney's office. In a letter delivered last week, the Attorney General's office notified Funk that they are, quote, investigating whether any official in your office has violated any criminal law. News Channel 5 obtained that letter through a public records request. Carrying on with the story here, while not precluding other areas of concern, the letter details specific interest by Skrmetti's office into whether anyone on Funk's team violated the state's wiretapping statute by installing listening devices in and around the DA's office in downtown Nashville. The existence of those devices revealed by News Channel 5. The letter indicates and instructs the Nashville Democrat to preserve all evidence regarding the purchase, installation, maintenance, and operation of recording devices, as well as the audio recordings themselves of any communications about those recordings. Skrmetti's notice came the day after News Channel 5 revealed that Funk's team had installed listening devices in areas around the DA's office capable of picking up conversations of employees and visitors who were not warned at any point about the audio recording or the audio monitoring. In a statement, Glenn Funk's office did not dispute the findings. Instead, they insisted it was a, quote, necessary part of office security and that there is no reasonable expectation for privacy for conversations in public places. I mean, folks, that statement itself is absurd on its face. Do you understand how many defense attorneys are walking around the DA's office at any given time? How many attorneys talking to clients may or may not be in the offices of the DA's office? I mean, it's absurd that they would suggest that there would not be private conversations potentially picked up on those wiretapping devices. Now, I don't know anything other than what has been revealed in this story from News Channel 5, so I'm not trying to get ahead of myself here. But I would presume, and I think it is a safe presumption, that the district attorney well understands that as a one-party state, that someone involved in any given conversation has to know that conversation is being recorded. And there are, my understanding of the law, and I like some others, just because I've studied the law for 20 years, I'm not going to call myself a lawyer, but I play one on the radio from time to time. A state can either be a one-party consent state or a two-party consent state. And so if I call you up and we live in a one-party consent state, then I can be the party that consents to the recording. You get it? So I can record a conversation without making you aware that the conversation is being recorded. If we are in a two-party consent state, that means I have to make you aware that the conversation is being recorded. Now, for our purposes on radio, for example, as an example, we understand that the laws are a little bit different for us, particularly for broadcast. So if I wanted to record a conversation for broadcast, I would need to make you aware that that conversation is being recorded for broadcast. One would think that Glenn Funk would be aware of the nuance of the law as well. So the investigation revealed that Glenn Funk, one, paid a part-time employee $75,000 a year with little evidence of what the person did for their money. It appeared to conflict with timesheets the employee submitted for the money. Employees of the DA's office used government resources and worked on Funk's re-election campaign last spring. That's a no-no. Photos and emails appeared to show office resources being used to investigate Funk's political opponents, which is obviously a no-no. So I applaud the Attorney General in this case, Jonathan Skrmetti, for doing something about this. I applaud him investigating it. At some point, one would presume, now, Funk is a Democrat, and one would presume that they would need to turn this over to the federal authorities. I don't know if there's any conflict of interest between the Attorney General investigating criminal activity in the DA's office or not. I will endeavor to get Attorney General Skrmetti on this show or on my show at a future day, tomorrow or later on in the week, and hopefully he can clear up some of these questions that we have. Now, as an FYI, our former guest in the last hour, Brink Fiddler, has indicated to me that 65 South coming out of the downtown loop is clear where 65 North merges on the loop to go eastbound. It is to go eastbound is where the disaster is, and it's backed up traffic on 65 north all the way back past 440. So that's coming in northbound, as I understand Brink describing it. And as I look here, stand by as I zoom in. Yes, that appears to be the case. So it's the northbound side of things that's causing the severe quag. But going south out of the city, it looks like you've got smooth sailing. So thank you, Brink, for that report. I appreciate that. All right, the president of the United States decided it was important to go to Ukraine. Apparently, and Wayne, make sure I've got some audio coming in on my computer over there, because I've got a couple of reactions for you from the mainstream media. So Joe Biden goes over to Ukraine in what was clearly a public relations photo opportunity. There's Joe, there's Vladimir, best buds on the 1-year anniversary of this awful conflict. No sane, rational person is taking Russia's side on this. I have to note that when I tell you that I have concerns that we have written a blank check and we've seen no real results that is in any way beneficial to the United States of America. And that's a problem, friends. But the media believes that this is a historic moment, as you might expect, because Joe Biden can do no wrong in their eyes. Let's go first to MSNBC, where they have reacted to Joe Biden's decision to go to Kyiv.
Chris, I think it's historic. It's like when JFK went to Berlin in 1963, when Ronald Reagan went to West Berlin in 1987 and said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. It sent a powerful message to Moscow that we are there to stay, a powerful message to our European NATO allies that we're there, that an American president went into a war zone without American troops on the ground. I think it's powerful, and I think we do have to stay the course. It's not just symbolism, it's actions. And when he's going to Poland, he's supporting a NATO ally that hosts more Ukrainian refugees than any other country, several million. And the Poles have been incredibly generous, and I think the American people need to be generous back.
All right, so there's Rick Stengel of MSNBC saying that this was a historic moment on par with John F. Kennedy going to Ich bin ein Berliner. What's the story I read once that the literal translation, this might be untrue, by the way, it might be an urban legend, but I want it to be true, that when Kennedy said, and I say to you today, Ich bin ein Berliner, that he was actually saying, I am a jelly donut, that he mispronounced one of the words, and what he was saying in German was, I am a delicious pastry or Danish. Now, one, if that's the case, you give him a pass. They understood what he meant. I mean, he misplaced like a pronoun or something or another. John F. Kennedy was cool before it was cool to misplace pronouns. But I've always heard that story, that Ich bin ein Berliner. I am a jelly donut. I want it to be true. So it's along par with that. Joe Biden going to Kyiv. Look, I understand what's happening in Ukraine is bad. I think we all can. But does that make it America's business? And even if you believe this is America's business, I can reasonably have conversations with people that think that we should be financially involved because it's in the best interest of global affairs. I get all of that. But how about an accounting for where our money's going? How about an itemized invoice telling us what we're spending where? How about let's let all this play out before we just lavish praise on Joe Biden in the manner that MSNBC has done? What about CNN? What did they have to say about it?
Our resident historian here, place this in the context, in the pantheon of presidential visits to war zones. Presidents have visited Iraq and Afghanistan in recent years, but those were U.S. wars. This is a Ukrainian war. No U.S. military presence on the ground. How significant?
I would note something. You notice the similarities in the setup? Maybe it's coincidence. Call me jaded. There's no presence of the U.S. military on the ground yet. Here is Joe Biden. What do you make of this? They wouldn't want my response.
Iraq and Afghanistan in recent years, but those were U.S. wars. This is a Ukrainian war, no U.S. military presence on the ground.
Would you agree with that assessment that this is not a U.S. war at this point? It seems like a U.S. war by proxy. We're sending money, arms, tanks, missiles. We're sending everything but human bodies. Are human bodies next? It's always been my fear that eventually this will be a war between Russia and the United States of America. I don't believe that Russia is a good actor. There are a lot of bad actors. There are a lot of bad heads of state. There are a lot of bad nations that I would not suggest we go to war with. That seems to be where the Democrats are leading us. All right, more on this. I'll get further reaction, and we will let you hear from the man himself. So this is a historic moment along the lines of, by the way, in a minute, you're going to hear someone compare Zelensky to Churchill. Whoa there, Chief. You need to hold your horses there, buddy. Let's slow down just a moment. It's 522 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
An investigation into District Attorney Glenn Funk's office and whether they're violating the state's wiretapping statute, and President Biden makes a surprise trip to Ukraine, plus a deadly crash. That and more. 5:30 Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Thank you much, Mac Maury. It's 5:26 right now. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. We'll be opening up the phone lines momentarily to get your thoughts on some of these matters involving Joe Biden and Ukraine. At 4:35 this afternoon, Robbie Starbuck, former political candidate in the 5th Congressional District, will join us. All-around good guy, and he and his wife have been on top of the gender reassignment surgery saga that has been ongoing in the state of Tennessee for several months, really several years. It's about to come to a conclusion, as it's my understanding that we are soon, this week to be precise, to see a bill get to the governor's desk. And the governor assured me last week, we had a conversation with Governor Bill Lee last Friday during this time on the drive, and he assured me that he would sign it immediately upon receipt and that it would become a law immediately, that it would be illegal to permanently alter the bodies of young people not at an age where they can make an informed and mature decision as to that permanent alteration. We'll talk with Robbie Starbuck about that coming up in the next few minutes. So I was sharing with you some of the media reaction, the over-the-top, as you might expect, media reaction. Now, of course, obviously, they're in the bag for Biden, and all of this would be muted had it been President Trump. And it was muted, by the way. They downplayed the historic significance, as an example, of the President of the United States meeting with the North Korean leader, as if it didn't really matter. But anything that Joe Biden does most certainly does.
As our resident historian here, place this in the context, in the pantheon of presidential visits to war zones. Presidents have visited Iraq and Afghanistan in recent years, but those were U.S. wars. This is a Ukrainian war. No U.S. military presence on the ground. How significant?
It's extremely significant. The United States is wedded more to the Ukraine than ever before. I go back to history and think of Roosevelt and Churchill when FDR had to sneak off in the dead of night, even had a body double at one point to first meet Winston Churchill off the coast of Newfoundland.
Okay. One, I thought it was Newfoundland, but I digress. So, come on, folks. Is this not... I understand that I'm no fan of Joe Biden, okay? But on President's Day, is CNN actually going to make the case that this is akin to Winston Churchill and FDR getting together in the midst of World War II to ensure that world domination is not furthered by an evil megalomaniac despot like Adolf Hitler? That's what we're going to compare this moment to? Look, no one is suggesting that Putin's a good guy. He's not. But he's no Hitler. He doesn't have the backing of a large swath of his country. And oh, by the way, I congratulate and applaud the Ukrainian people for fighting back in the manner that they have. And I applaud nations like Poland and other European countries of taking up the effort to help assist Ukraine. And I could even get behind the United States of America doing our part as a world leader on the world stage. But this concept of a blank check foreign policy initiative for Ukraine is ridiculous. Is there any wonder, considering some of the entanglements that Joe Biden has had with the Ukrainian people over the years, that we would not be as friendly as ever with them?
And then, of course, you had all those World War II meetings between Churchill. It's worth, mentioning Churchill, because Zelensky has been called the Churchill of our generation. And
the Churchill of our generation.
Called the Churchill of our generation, and Biden going there today, I think it's going to be a moment for the history books. It's like when John F. Kennedy went to Berlin in 1961 and gave a speech at the height of the Cold War. Ukraine is the new Berlin. It's the rally point for NATO and the Western allies, and I think Biden did something really heroic.
That is Doug Brinkley on CNN. He's with Jim Scudder, calling Vladimir Zelensky, the Winston Churchill of our time, and I presume that would make Joe Biden the Franklin Delano Roosevelt of our time. Franklin Delano Roosevelt could not walk. Joe Biden cannot think. It is fine. Don't make me laugh. It is 5:31 on Super Talk 99.7. I was trying to make a serious point.
Sorry.
5:31 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
.531, I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. Right now, 67 degrees in Nashville. Looking like we might have some showers here later on tonight. But other than that, wouldn't be very light. Low 50 degrees here tonight. Looking at traffic, still that South Loop, 65 north from around exit 77 on. Struggling there because on the South Loop, we got a crash over there. 40 east, still dealing with that overturned vehicle. Got the left lane blocked. Look on a 440 eastbound, crash right lane block. That's on Nolensville Pike, exit 6. And then I-40 eastbound near the 65 south at exit 210A. So that I-40 eastbound turnover vehicle that's blocking the left lane goes from 210A to around 221A. That's causing issues over there. That's traffic here on Super Talk. Weather and traffic coming up just a few minutes away. Starting with the breaking news we've been following from News Channel 5. Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti has opened up a criminal investigation into Nashville District Attorney Glenn Funk's office to see if they're recording people inside of the building without their knowledge. News Channel 5 had already uncovered that they were recording devices inside of that office. Funk and the office did not dispute that, saying that it's a necessary part of the office security and that you can't expect privacy in a public place. Channel 5 also looked into photos and emails that appeared to show the office resources being used to investigate Funk's political opponents. Funk has denied any wrongdoing. And President Biden makes his pitch to Europe today, not just to give up on Ukraine, even making a high-risk visit to Kyiv today to show U.S. commitment. The Biden administration also needs to make that pitch back here at home. Congress needs to approve the funding for the military equipment sent overseas. Jay O'Brien tells us the president will be relying on some unlikely allies to make it work.
Mitch McConnell, a staunch supporter for continued aid for Ukraine. Senators like Lindsey Graham say that they believe there will be continued support for Ukraine in both chambers. Graham saying he's confident that there's going to be bipartisan support to send F-16 to Ukraine and train soldiers there. He said that to me and other reporters last week.
And that is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
It is not Brian Wilson today on The Drive. It is the well-coiffed Matt Murphy, 539. Good afternoon, good evening. Hope you're well. If you are stuck on I-40 eastbound, there's nothing I can do for you. If you're stuck on 65 northbound, there's not a lot I can do for you there either, but I'm trying to do as much as I can to make that drive home as pleasant as humanly possible, and I do so by telling you all of the antics of the Biden administration. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but you know what? We're going to go through our best presidents, worst presidents in the 6 o'clock hour, so maybe that'll salve some of the wounds that I'm sharing with you in the form of sound bites from Joe Biden over in Ukraine and sound bites from the media just lavishing over-the-top praise on Biden's trip, comparing it to John F. Kennedy, Ich bin ein Berliner in 1961, or Ronald Reagan in 1987 when he told him, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. One commentator on CNN actually compared the trip that Biden made to Ukraine. By the way, which is, look, I can understand why we can have reasonable discussion about whether or not we, as a United States of America, should be providing material aid to the Ukrainian people. But the simple concept of a lack of accountability should stop us all. All of this should stop until there's a measure of accountability. Give us the invoice, itemize the invoice, and tell us what the hell's going on over there. And oh, by the way, there's no way we should be providing actual materials, because when you do, I'm talking about tanks, and now Lindsey Graham is suggesting planes? Are you kidding me? Now we have to have teams of American soldiers and American servicemen and women in country making sure that our aircraft have a place to land and a place to go? As Joe Biden would like to say, come on, man. All right, to talk about these and many, many other matters, it's always good to catch up with and speak with Robbie Starbuck. He's a former candidate for the 5th Congressional District, an all-around good guy. He is he's not a born and bred Tennessean, but you would fool me if you told me that, because he loves this state, and I'm coming to love it as well, and I'm coming to love our conversations. Robbie, thank you for being on with us. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Fabulous. Let me start with Joe Biden and his decision to head over to Ukraine for a public relations photo op. Where are you on the concept of America opening our wallets and spending untold billions of dollars to support the Ukrainians? I think that you can support Ukraine broadly and not support open wallet policy by the Biden administration. What do you say?
I would say, let's start with this. We have multiple cities here in the United States of America where we don't have clean drinking water. We have crumbling infrastructure. We have hungry children. We have homeless veterans. We have homeless families, including children. We have our own problems. We have fentanyl rushing into our country every day, enough to kill every single American citizen, mind you. Okay, that doesn't get talked about enough. And we have prioritized as a country, at least our government has, sending over $100 billion to Ukraine. And the latest kicker is we're paying for the pensions of Ukrainian government officials and Ukrainians in general. And now, don't get me wrong, I feel terrible for the people in Ukraine. I mean, this is an awful situation for civilians especially. They didn't ask for this. They don't want this. People don't want to be in war. War is a horror that should never be subjected on anybody. And, you've got to have a very high bar for when you get into war. And I think, I heard you in your opening there talk about Lindsey Graham. If it was up to people like Lindsey Graham, we would be sending our young boys and girls to go die over in Ukraine. And, I am just happy that voters in this country made the right choice, at least enough to prevent that from happening. Because had we gotten a bunch more rhinos and Democrats in this midterm, we would be sending our young boys and girls over there to die, and we have to prevent this from continuing. There is no accountability, and as much as Americans got it right, making sure we didn't end up in that scenario, we still have to hold our members of Congress accountable, because they are not doing enough to ensure that there is real accountability. I want to know where every dime went. I want to know every single detail of this, because I just read an expose about a week and a half ago about government officials who had to resign because the media, at least a couple enterprising journalists, got their hands on the fact that these people had used money to go on these expensive vacations on private jets, buying sports cars, and mansions, okay? Where did that money come from? I want to know. I want to know where our money is going when it's not going to fix, the crumbling infrastructure in our country, when it's not going to get people clean drinking water in our country. I would like an accounting of it.
Well, and just so people understand what Robbie's talking about, here's Joe Biden from 2 days ago talking about that very subject regarding pensions.
Much-needed humanitarian assistance as well as food, water, medicine, shelter, and other aid to Ukrainians displaced by Russia's war, and provide aid for those seeking refuge in other countries from Ukraine. It's also going to help schools and hospitals open. It's going to allow pensions and social support to be paid to the Ukrainian people so they have something in their pocket.
All right, so he's literally, Robbie, talking about putting money into the pockets of the Ukrainian people. In the meantime, I've not heard one word out of the White House about any White House official, be it the president, the vice president, Pete Buttigieg, anyone, heading to East Palestine, Ohio, to help support the individuals in need there.
No, you know what? The people in East Palestine, Ohio, they need to go and start identifying. The Democrats like to identify. You can identify as whatever you want. They need to identify Ukrainians, because then maybe they'll get some help from this administration. This is shameful what's going on. And I say that, I know it's funny to people, but it's really not funny. I mean, that's literally how far gone crazy we are on this crazy train with this White House, because they would have a better chance if they identified as Ukrainians. And some of the people that they brought into this bureaucracy are so short-sighted, they would just stamp the paper if it said Ukrainian. So maybe that's the answer. They need to start doing that. But the truth is, you know what people don't talk about when you hear Joe Biden say this is that Social Security is on track to be entirely broke within the decade. Medicare is in trouble. You want to save these things for the elderly in our country, especially, who depend on these checks. They depend on getting Social Security. They depend on being able to have Medicare. Why are we not dealing with that situation? Why are we not ensuring that our elderly who paid into this system are going to be able to get what they paid for, let alone the people who are in their 40s, 50s, 30s who are paying into it right now? How are we securing that here in America? We're not, but we are sending billions and billions and billions of dollars over to Ukraine to make sure that their social welfare is taken care of, to make sure that their pensions are taken care of. I don't care how you slice it. That is ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous to anybody. And this is a great reminder of why we need to ensure that our focus going into every election is elect people who are going to put America first.
Amen. Well spoken, Robbie. Robbie Starbuck, our guest for the next few moments. Robbie, I know you and your wife have worked tirelessly to help draw attention to and to hold healthcare officials in Tennessee to account on the issue of underage gender reassignment or mutilation surgeries. We are set to see a bill signed by the governor to a companion bill that would prevent adult entertainment venues from bringing their adult entertainment to our kids as well. The governor is set to sign these. I spoke with him on Friday, and he said as soon as it gets out of the House, as soon as these bills get to his desk, he's not going to wait. He's going to sign them, and they'll go into law immediately. It has to be satisfying for you and your wife to see this come to fruition, and for all Tennesseans who want to prevent permanently life-altering surgeries and procedures on our youngsters that amount to child abuse. Talk about the possibility of this being signed within the week.
I can't even put into words how joyful it makes me, and I know there's people on the other side who are upset and angry, and that's tough, and I hope they find a state that they feel is more welcoming to their point of view, but it's not going to be here. This is a place where we're going to protect kids. And, my hope is other states are going to see this as a model for how to do this, because we did it in such a way that I truly believe every sort of legal route they're going to take to try to shut this down is going to be fruitless. We are going to prevail because it's written so well. And I want to applaud everybody involved in this, from Jack Johnson, William Lamberth, and all the other legislators getting behind this, and our governor getting behind it. This is common sense at its best. This is, Tennessee values at its best, setting a standard for the country, and that's what we should expect of Tennessee. I got real tired during COVID of seeing Florida leading on COVID issues, and in Tennessee, we have this opportunity with such a great state, such great voters, to be the model, be the leader, and we are doing it with this. And so I couldn't be more proud. My birthday is February 27th, so this is like, I don't need birthday presents. This is the best thing possible for me, because it immediately, I'm a dad. I have 3 kids. I've got a 14-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 6-year-old, and I know that they're protected by proxy, even though these issues will never touch them because they interact with the kids who it would affect. They interact with them on a generational level. They will work with these people by their side who would be affected and be protected by this because functionally, and that's the thing people don't talk about, is they go, well, if it's not your kids, why are you worried? My kids grow up in the world with these problems. And so that's our duty as men and women, is stand up for your values and ensure that the state you're in, the town you're in, is a reflection of the place you want your kids to grow up and the people you want your kids to grow up around. And so I'm proud of everybody involved. This is exactly what we need more of in America, is local leadership taking the reins and saying we're not allowing this lunacy from the federal level or from these globalist elites at the World Economic Forum and the UN to come to our town. We are going to take control.
Robbie Starbuck with us for a couple of additional moments. Robbie, I used to watch, before he went absolutely mentally insane, I used to watch David Letterman a lot when I was in college. And he played a game called Something or Nothing. And he would bring someone out on stage, and they would be doing something, something. And the audience at home and the band and Paul Schaefer would vote. Is this something or nothing? I'm going to ask you. Recently, Phil Williams of News Channel 5 had a piece about 5th Congressional District Congressman Andy Ogles, in which Andy's been calling himself an economist for some time. And this piece was scathing. It was a hit piece, there's no doubt. I wonder what your thoughts on this are. I have said that this is obviously a self-inflicted wound, but it's also fairly unimportant in the grand scheme of things. Robbie Starbuck, is this something or nothing?
The economist part, I don't think is anything, and I know people would expect me to be like, be on the attack, but no, truthfully, the economist thing seems like nothing to me. What did bother me, though, is that there was some other reporting done by other reporters in the country, and I've seen some conservative reporters tap into this and start asking questions about it, and it's that he made the remark multiple times that he was an investigator of child sex crimes. However, in truth, what happened was he said he was a police officer too. In truth, he was a reserve officer with Williamson County, and the Williamson County Sheriff's Office put out a statement saying, actually, he never went to the training, so we took away his reserve status after 2 years because he never came to the required meetings, and he never worked in child sex crimes at all. That bothers me. Saying that you have worked on one of the most heinous things, because as you know, Matt, my wife, she works in this world. She has a nonprofit where they fight child exploitation. She is an advocate and helps survivors of sex trafficking. And so the idea of anybody going and claiming to have done this work and then providing no proof they've done so, and the only thing we're seeing back is the sheriff's office pushing back saying, yeah, no, that actually didn't happen, that does worry me, and that could be something. And, I would say there's also the financial issues with the FEC. There could be something there. So if I'm being reasonable, honest, it's kind of like you asked me about George Santos. Obviously, George Santos is a liar. Do I think they should throw him out of Congress? Now, the problem there is we have such a thin majority that you really have to ask yourself what's in the best interest of the American people, and at what point do we allow bureaucrats in Washington to overrule the vote of voters? And even though I may not like Santos, I think he's a liar very clearly. People voted for him in New York, and they should have the opportunity in the next election to vote him out. And I think same thing with any congressman who is caught lying.
Always on top of it, Robbie, and always a good conversation. I appreciate you being so forthcoming with your time, and we'll do it again next time. Take care.
Absolutely. You too.
All right. There's Robbie Starbuck joining us for a few moments, and you can catch him online at Robbie Starbuck. I appreciate his time, and I hope you did as well. It's 5:52 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. The Drive. No Brian Wilson. Matt in for Brian.
6:02, I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. Right now it is 66 degrees. We'll get down into the low 50s here tonight. Some possible showers, but it'll just be some light rain. No storms to go along with it. Weather forecast coming up. Looking at some traffic right now. I-40 eastbound around Hermitage, exit 221A, still dealing with that overturned vehicle. It's blocking things down there. That's from 210 to 221A. Things are slow over there on I-40. Again, that's headed out of town eastbound. Blocking the left lane, that overturned vehicle. And then I-40 eastbound, Spence Lane, exit 213. In between there's a crash as well, so that's blocking the right lane. So really 210 to 221A, I-40 eastbound is a mess. I-65 northbound approaching I-40, that's in the south loop. There's police activity. Their exit ramp is blocked. The left lane is blocked. That's on exit 82 on the south loop. Again, going northbound on I-65, headed into Music City. And then I-65 between Gallatin, Cross Plains Highway exit 112 and Portland Highway exit 121. Lanes have been shifted to the inside due to construction. Again, traffic coming up here soon. Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Scrimetti has opened up a criminal investigation into Nashville District Attorney Glenn Funk's office to see if they're recording people inside of the building without their knowledge. News Channel 5 had already uncovered that there were recording devices inside of the office. Funk and the office did not dispute that, saying it's a necessary part of office security and that you can't expect privacy in a public place. Others say that is a direct violation of the state's wiretapping statute. Channel 5 also looked into photos and emails appearing to show office resources being used to investigate Funk's political opponents. Funk has denied any wrongdoing. And a new earthquake has hit southern Turkey this Monday near the Syria border. It's been just 2 weeks since a massive quake killed thousands in that region. Ibtisan Yinfood is in Turkey.
A 6.3 magnitude earthquake rocked the province of Hatay in Turkey on Monday after a similar massive event killed tens of thousands only 2 weeks prior. There are already several injured across the region, according to Turkish authorities and Syrian rescuers. At a camp where 700 people rendered homeless by the initial earthquake were spending the night, the surrounding buildings shook for nearly 15 seconds and the power grid went off. Most of them sitting outside, huddling around fires to keep warm. They started praying and shouting to get away from the buildings. At least 20 aftershocks have been felt since.
The earthquake today is 6.3 magnitude. The earthquake on February 6th, a 7.8. In HIV, it's become a chronic, manageable disease for many patients, but have doctors found a real cure? Here's Andy Field.
Researchers think they've now cured at least 5 people who've lived with the virus that causes AIDS. The latest just confirmed, a 53-year-old man with no detectable HIV, even after stopping medication 4 years ago. Doctors used a stem cell transplant, usually used in cancer patients who've run out of options. They say using this for all HIV patients is a long way off. In the meantime, modern drugs have controlled the virus. They're looking for a vaccine as well.
And that is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
Yes, indeed. It is The Drive. No Brian Wilson today. Matt Murphy in for Brian. I'll be here till about 7 o'clock, or they throw me off the radio, whichever comes first. Normally, I'm on from noon until 3. I hope you get a chance to catch me on a day-to-day basis. Today, from 3 until 7 o'clock. I am capably joined by Wayne. He's behind the glass, making sure that everything that comes out of our speakers sounds as good as possible. There's Mac Maury back in the house.
Yeah.
What's up, Maury? How are
What's
you?
going on, man? Happy President's Day. Happy Monday.
Absolutely. You know, I have some presidential fun facts.
Oh, I love it. Yes.
I mean, don't you love a presidential fun fact? I do. And we'll have some of that coming up in just a few minutes after I tell you what's going on. I mean, you told us some of the news of the day, but I want to fill in some of the gaps that we haven't gotten to yet on the drive. And then maybe we'll get into some fun stuff coming up in just a moment. But I remind you, Brian's back tomorrow. I'm back in my normal place at noon tomorrow leading up to the drive. Brian will be back in the house. I know that pleases many of you. You can reach us at 615-737-9986 if you so desire. 615-737-9986. I know that Mac Maury's been covering these roadway circumstances. They seem to be calming down to a certain degree. I mean, the deal out on I-40 eastbound is still bad, at least according to SmartWays. They're reporting that there's still a tremendous backup. And you tell me if you're seeing anything different there, Maury.
Yep,
and also
same.
northbound, 65 northbound, that quag was caused by some sort of accident coming into the city. I think I erroneously called it southbound, but it's northbound. Thank you, Brink Fiddler, for correcting me there. And that seems to still be backed up. But otherwise, things seem to be calming down a little bit, right? Yeah?
Yeah, looking a little bit lighter. Yeah, that I-40 East, I mean, that's been since this afternoon. So, 2, 3 p.m.
Yeah, so it's obviously a pretty significant accident, very serious accident. And we hope and pray that everybody's okay, and we hope that you can find an alternate route if you happen to be going that way. Let me give you a spot of good news before we get into some of the presidential stuff. One thing, I think I don't know how you feel about it, and maybe there are mixed feelings about this. I don't know. I believe there were when these items first came into being. The first safe haven baby box in Tennessee has been installed at a Knoxville fire station. A blessing ceremony for the new resource was held on Friday. This coming from a story out of the Tennessee Star. Located at the Knoxville Fire Station number 17 on Western Avenue, the Safe Haven Baby Box is a resource for mothers in crisis to, quote, safely, securely, and anonymously surrender if they're unable to care for their newborn baby. Under the Tennessee Safe Haven law, mothers of newborns are legally allowed to surrender unharmed babies to designated facilities within 2 weeks of birth without fear of being prosecuted. As long as the baby is unharmed and the child is surrendered within 2 weeks, the mother or parents will not be prosecuted and is assured of complete confidentiality. Many mothers in crisis, according to the Safe Haven Baby Box organization, want and need anonymity when surrendering an infant due to fear of recognition, of stigma associated with surrendering a child, or prosecution fears due to ignorance and or misunderstanding of the Safe Haven law. Using the Safe Haven Baby Box, mothers are protected from being seen and no face-to-face interactions during the surrender process take place. So this is the way this thing works. The box, at least in this case, and I would assume I've heard of these in other states, they are installed on an exterior wall of the Knoxville fire station with an exterior door that automatically locks if someone puts something inside of the box. There's also an interior door which allows individuals in the fire department. Obviously, a fire department is a perfect place to do this because there's always someone there. So the interior door allows the fire department staff member to secure the surrendered newborn from inside the box. And obviously, at that time, any newborn that is delivered there, fire department staff would care for the child until personnel with the Department of Children's Services arrive to take over that process. I guess I'm bringing this up to tell, I don't know of many people that are against this. I would imagine that if someone was, it would be in that it is making it easier for a person not to take care of their immediate duties as a mother. But I don't know of a lot of people that would be against this. I mean, obviously, it is preferable to what we saw going on 20 years ago, 10 years ago. I don't hear a lot about newborn abandonment, maybe there are stories that are still out there. But I applaud this fire department. I applaud Knoxville, and hopefully we'll see more of these around the state of Tennessee. I mean, obviously you don't want them ever to be used, but if they are, they are to good use. In other words, as opposed to a child potentially being harmed or dying as a result of the mother not being psychologically, mentally, or physically able to care for the child, you have this option in which an individual is assured that if the baby is unharmed and newborn, that they will not be prosecuted in any way, and their anonymity is assured. And there's a lot of verbiage on the outside of the box. You can see photos over at TennesseeStar.com. Maybe I'll post one up on my Facebook page or my Twitter feed, in which individuals in Knoxville were blessing the box. And I say blessings to the individuals responsible for putting that up. It's just it's a wonderful thing. We need to see one of those in Nashville, or even multiple in the city of Nashville. Speaking of Nashville Mayor John Cooper sent letters to both the Republican and Democrat parties expressing interest in the city paying host to the 2028 National Political Convention. So I made you aware of this. Actually, it wasn't me. It was Cameron Sexton, the Speaker of the House, who came on The Drive on Friday. I believe it was the first time we heard about this, and told us that this had happened. Apparently, the mayor had the ability to do this for the 2024 Republican National Convention, but chose not to. So the mayor has the ability to send a letter of interest in lieu of the Metro Council presenting a letter of interest, and they carry the same weight. So now the respective national conventions, Democrat and Republican, will make a consideration. They will. I think we're in the running with Houston, Texas, if I'm not mistaken. We were beaten out by Milwaukee because of a lack of interest on the part of the Metro Council. It was naked partisanship at the time, and we knew it. Bottom line is this: they did not want Donald Trump in the city of Nashville should he have been the nominee. They didn't want that possibility. One can only assume that perhaps the Metro Council, considering the amount of money that would come in as a result, would be more willing to accept the Republican National Convention's cash, along with all of the people that would come along with it, for 2028. Remains to be seen. The Democrats are open in 2028 as well, so we'll find out if one or the other. One would assume both would not pick the same city. Now, there's also a lot of questions about the amount of money that this would generate. It would no doubt be a monetary generator, above and beyond what would be a normal couple of weeks in the summertime in Nashville. Every single hotel room would be full. Now, some would say, well, Murph, most of the hotel rooms would be full anyway. That's true. But I would suggest that the hotel rooms that are full that week, those that are planning a trip to Nashville would obviously avoid that week, but they would come anyway. So they're not deciding to not come. They're deciding to come on a different weekend or a different week schedule. And so you kind of double up on your money in that way. However, I am not naive or foolish enough to believe that the projected amount of money is going to be anywhere close to actual dollars. No. Murphy mantra number 47. Anytime the government tells you that something's going to cost X amount of dollars, go ahead and multiply that times 2. And anytime the government tells you that they're going to bring in a certain amount of dollars, go ahead and cut that in half. And then we can start with some realistic figures. So if the government tells you, I'll just use this as an example. I'm not saying I'm for or against or whatever. The government tells you that a new stadium in Nashville for the Tennessee Titans and other events is going to cost, I don't know, $2 billion. Double it. Double it. And we'll see who's closer to being right, them or me. I bet you. And when they tell you that something's going to bring in X amount of dollars in revenue, half that. And maybe you're approaching the real number. I can't stand it. Government officials use this multiplier effect that is just absurd to me. Well, you see, Murph, it's not only the real dollars that come into the city of Nashville that are of benefit, because when someone from out of town comes in and they spend their hard-earned money at a restaurant, they're tipping a waitress money that she otherwise wouldn't get, and she's going to go ahead and spend that money. So you have to count when she spends her money as well as when the first guy spends his money. You see how that works? No, it really doesn't work, because the waitress would have made money if this guy wasn't in town, maybe not quite as much, and maybe she would adjust her spending accordingly. I mean, the multiplier effect is just a way to build up that number. So we're told that if the Republican National Convention, as an example, comes into town, that it's going to bring in like $150 million with it or something like that, just half that. And we start around $75 million. Maybe it's a little less, maybe it's a little more, who knows? But it sure won't be $150 million bucks. Of direct impact? I don't think so. All right, I promised that we have an open phone line policy, and I see here that Adam's been holding for 50 minutes. Is that not correct? Is Adam still there? Well, goodness gracious, Adam. I mean, that's a fault of the host that he did not get to you sooner. My goodness gracious, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your call. What's on your mind?
Well, you're driving me absolutely crazy. Except that I had the time being on hold to calm down, so I can think clearly now. So, listening to you, you sound like you are for what's going on in Ukraine. Your only real big problem is the fact that there's no accountability for all the billions of dollars that are being spent. Is that accurate?
When you say I sound like I'm for what's going on in Ukraine, what do you mean?
You are for us helping the Ukrainians to the extent that we are. You just want to see where all that.
No. Well, if that was the indication I gave off, I apologize, Adam. I do not believe that America should be involved to the level that we are. To wit, I do not believe that we should be providing surface-to-air missiles. I do not believe we should be providing tanks. I do not believe that we should be providing the level of military equipment that we are currently providing. I believe that there is a danger that this is a slow walk to an American war with Russia. I would be willing to talk about monetary assistance with regard to Ukrainian pushback because I don't like the idea of Russia invading someone's sovereign space. But I've not seen a clear and direct accounting that would make me agreeable to anything. Instead, we're just writing blank checks for the Ukrainian people, so I would be willing to talk about certain monetary assistance, but I do not believe that we should involve ourselves to the point that we're offering actual material military equipment.
You're welcome. You have a good night. I'm sorry. I'm doing DoorDash, and I just dropped off somebody's dinner. Anyhow.
Wow.
Are you?
No, I'm here. I'm here. You dropped off someone's dinner while I was answering your question. That's fascinating.
Well, you know what?
No, Adam, don't apologize. You're making the economy go. Yeah. What is your? I mean, are you okay now? Are you done with your?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, well
I'm pulled over.
Dude, that's cool.
That's But I saw the person coming out looking for me because they can find me on the app. So they were out in their driveway looking. So
well, if they complain about their food being cold, blame me, and I'll cover the difference. Okay.
No, she was grateful. She was very
so
happy.
Where are you on the Ukrainian deal? Where are you on it?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, you're a really smart guy. That's really clear to me. So we got to get this thing straightened out between you and Tucker Carlson. You guys, you drive me nuts because we are at the beginning of World War III if we don't do what we're doing. And not only should we be providing what we're providing, but we should be providing more, like aircraft. Queen Elizabeth recognized this. She lived through World War II. Go back to the Bush administration. We went into Georgia, the Russians took over part of Georgia. We did nothing. Obama took over Crimea. We did nothing. Now the Russians are going into eastern Ukraine, And suddenly you've got the parts of Europe that have basically stood back since World War II. Sweden, Finland have both joined NATO. You've got Estonia that is now providing 50%, 1% of their GDP to the Ukrainians to fight the Russians. You have Switzerland that has come off the dime at least a little bit as far as their neutrality, although they're still protecting the oligarchs. But that being said, we've got a situation here where we can nip this in the bud. Now, I think it's horrible that we're spending the money that we're spending without accountability.
All right, hold
Absolutely horrible.
you have waited so long. I don't want to rush you, and you seem like a really smart guy. So here's what I'm going to do. I have to do this, and then I'm going to come back to you and answer some of the points that you've made and continue the discussion in a moment at 6:24 on Super Talk.
A deadly crash in Murray County, North Korea launched some missiles this weekend and taking a trip over to Wall Street. The money news, that and more, 30 minutes after the hour. Super Talk, 99.7 WTN.
I'm so excited that we'll talk about presidential trivia right after the news at 6:35, Maury. I mean,
That'll be a great
you'll
little solo
stop by.
combo.
You'll stop by
It'll be a
just for
great
a minute.
monologue.
You'll stop by for a minute, I'm sure. Hey, who's your favorite president, McMorry? You're not going to tell me, are you?
There's just too
if
many.
you just
too
went
many
old
great
school,
ones.
if you just went old school, you'd be safe.
Reagan.
Say James K. Polk, and you're fine. You're fine. Nobody can criticize you on that.
I'll go Reagan.
Reagan was pretty good. The great communicator. Mine, I'll go a little further back. Silent Cal, Calvin Coolidge, a laissez-faire attitude regarding what government interference there should be into the business of business. You know, that's what Cal said. He said the business of America is business. Now, some would suggest that his laissez-faire approach led to a lack of regulation that eventually led to the stock market crash in 1929. There's a lot of debate about that, but Silent Cal, best stories in the world about that president of the United States. I'll tell you a couple of them after McMorray's news. I want to finish up with Adam because he was so gracious with his time. So let me ask you this. Let me bottom line this in the couple of minutes that we have, Adam. So what do you believe is America's interest in putting boots on the ground and risking the spilling of blood of American soldiers to expel Russia from Ukraine? What is our primary goal and interest?
Our primary goal and interest is for that not to happen. First of all, there's no doubt we already have boots on the ground. Look at what we already have boots on the ground. What's still in northern Syria, because we just took out that guy in northern Syria. We were out under Trump, and now we're back in a small way. And we're in a small way, I think, in Ukraine right now, training them on the Ukrainian side. Do I know this for a fact? I don't. But I'm betting that we have a small presence, don't you? Don't you think so?
Yeah, I think there's covert ops there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so back to your question. The idea is to keep us out of the war. It's the same reason that all those countries are sending money, all the European countries are sending all their money to Ukraine. They don't want the war to come to their country. I don't want that war. War is horrible. It is horrible. And you don't want that war to come to your country. You don't want to spill the blood of American soldiers. I don't want that in the worst kind of way. And so if we get involved now in a bigger way and let the Ukrainians do the fighting for us and for the other European NATO countries, then we can avoid getting into that war. And already Russia is I forget how many people Putin has switched in the last few months, but at least three different generals have been in charge in the last few months.
Okay,
so the idea is to keep us out of the war.
Okay. So, and I'm not coming at you when I ask you this, but just to justify, and sorely lacking in time, and I'm sorry for that because this is a good exchange. So doesn't that argument sound suspiciously like the argument that led to the Vietnam War?
No, because
that we need to hold on. Think about it for a minute before you. That we need to arm and enable and empower the Vietnamese boys, the Asian boys, to do what American boys ought not to be doing. Wasn't that the justification?
Sure. Yes, it was. Absolutely. But at the same time, those folks did not. They didn't do it. They needed our help. They collapsed as soon as we left. There's nobody in there helping the Ukrainians right now, and they're doing it on their own. And first they had to prove that to the Europeans and to us before we really started to put money in there.
I don't know. There's about $40 billion that would, we're assisting. There's no doubt. And look, Adam, call me back. I mean, I love it. I love the exchange, and I'm sorry that I have to cut it down, but I do. And you waited a long time while you're door dashing, which is just absolutely phenomenal.
Great.
And I would say this, Adam, if you're willing to bring me something to eat next time I fill in for Brian Wilson in the drive, you sit down. We talk for as long as you want on international politics, and we'll get it all solved. We'll just get orders from Wayne and orders from McMorray and order from Matt Murphy, and then we'll solve the world's problems. Thank you, Adam, for the call. News is coming up right now on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
6:33, I'm Mac Maury with your top stories right now. 65 degrees in Music City. Just looking at traffic right now, a deathly crash in Murray County. At least one person dead there, according to the Tennessee Highway Patrol. This happened around 4 p.m. on US 43 at Old Zion Road. It was between a commercial vehicle and a passenger vehicle. We'll keep you updated with that right here on Super Talk. Looking at the rest of traffic, I-40 eastbound, an accident around Donaldson Pike, exit 216, and then I-40 eastbound, still dealing with that overturned vehicle around 221A, and that's at Hermitage Central Pike. Weather traffic coming up soon. The UN Security Council today discussed the 3 missile launches by North Korea over the weekend, but there was no unified call for condemnation. Here's Shannon Crawford.
Even as North Korea ramps up its nuclear threats and ballistic missile testing, the United Nations Security Council isn't taking any action. That's because Russia and China, 2 of the body's powerful veto-wielding members, are refusing to support any measure against Pyongyang.
They've blocked all of our attempts at robust responses.
At an emergency meeting, U.S. Ambassador to the UN Linda Thomas-Greenfield urged representatives from both countries to at the very least formally condemn the launches. Those pleas were ignored.
The Council's lack of action is worse than shameful. It is dangerous.
And over to the Money News, Derry Albinger.
It's a short week for the markets, which took Monday off to celebrate President's Day. This is traditionally a good day for sales, especially for bigger ticket items from cars to mattresses to home appliances. You may want to compare the deals that are offered by online and brick and mortar stores if you're planning to make a purchase. Wall Street will reopen for business as usual on Tuesday. Earnings season rolls on this week. We're going to hear from some of the nation's biggest retailers, including Home Depot, Walmart, and TJX, as they report on their holiday quarter and the performance in the face of persistent inflation. Also look for the latest earnings from eBay, Etsy, Square, and Warner Discovery. Microsoft will try to save its $69 billion bid to buy Activision Blizzard this week. The company has come under fire from U.S. and EU regulators who are worried that the deal could give Microsoft an unfair share of the tech market.
And that is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
I'm going to be here for a minute. I'm just getting warmed up. It's Matt Murphy in for Brian Wilson. The Drive, Super Talk 99.7 WTN 640. Thank you for being with us. I've been remiss on the Super Text line. I've not gone to the Super Text line all evening, to my knowledge. Plus, we've had telephone calls that I've missed, and I apologize for all of that. Let's clean it up in the last 20 minutes of broadcast. 615-737-9986. 615-737-WWTN. Either Super Text or, of course, you can also hit us up on the phone lines. So, this is the reaction. This is the actual reaction. I just want to clean up a couple of stories I haven't gotten to yet. The actual reaction from the Secretary of Transportation when questioned on their ineffective response to the Ohio train derailment.
Look, rail safety is something that has evolved a lot over the years, but there's clearly more that needs to be done because while this horrible situation has gotten a particularly high amount of attention, there are roughly 1,000 cases a year of a train derailing.
All right, so you understand what he's doing there? Now, I understand train derailments are far more regular of occurrences than we would believe. This is getting more attention, sir, not because of the derailment itself. This is what fascinates me. He said, while this horrible situation has gotten a particularly high amount of attention, there are roughly 1,000 cases a year. Sure, there are a lot more train derailments than there should be. However, this isn't about the derailment. This is about the willingness on the part of the state of Ohio and the National Transportation Safety Board and the Department of Transportation to allow people to go back in after you intentionally blew the train up. I would not presume to know if that was the right call. I've seen plenty of experts on multiple networks explaining that it wasn't. That you could have solved that situation without blowing the train up, but it would have taken much longer. Much longer. Obviously tying up those train tracks, obviously costing Norfolk Southern money. You see? I love business. I love big business. I don't love government. And unfortunately, big business understands that when it gets entangled with government, oftentimes it can use government as leverage to do what it wants, even if that's against the better judgment of the people surrounding the situation, or if that might do something to harm or put in harm's way the general population. Government should act as an oversight and a regulatory control over abuse, not as a co-conspirator. And it feels to me like government was acting as a co-conspirator with Norfolk Southern to put aside the dangers of the population in East Palestine and open up the train tracks in the most expedient way possible. In this case, blowing the damn thing up and crossing your fingers and hoping that everything works out. In the meantime, Pete Buttigieg is just non-existent as an actual transportation secretary. Donald Trump spent his weekend going after Ron DeSantis, despite the fact that Ron DeSantis is not running for president of the United States of America, at least not officially. If you follow Donald Trump on Truth Social, you probably saw, you probably saw many of the clips several of the comments that Donald Trump has made with regard to Ron DeSantis, specifically in writer Selena Zito's fake news puff piece about DeSantis, which supposedly appeared in the dying New York Post. I guess now in the sequel. Look, I've been a Trump fan. I just want him to continue to move forward and not look backward. Make America great again is a matter of looking forward, not backward. And if Donald Trump looks backward as to how to run his campaign in 2024, I think that's a mistake. I think it's a mistake to try to relive the glory days of 2015 in 2023. I think it's a mistake to think that Ron DeSantis is Jeb Bush, and it seems that that's what Donald Trump thinks. And I love Trump, and I love some of the things that he did during his 4 years as president, and I would take Trump over just about any other politician nowadays. At least I can believe that he's honest. Yeah. When it comes to matters of the state. I said it. But this is not good. This is not good. Anyway, he continues. The dying New York Post, which is way down in readership, just like Fox News is way down in ratings. Why doesn't she mention that he wants to cut Social Security and Medicare? That's a non-existent argument. It's an argument of Democrats, and it's not good. Loves losers like Jeb Bush, Paul Ryan, and Karl Rove. That's classic Trump, and I think it's funny. And is getting clobbered in the polls by me. That's true. He's getting beaten by Trump right now. DeSantis is a rhino. That's not true. Who is trying to hide his past. I don't read the New York Post anymore. It's become fake news, just like Fox and the Wall Street Journal. If everyone's an enemy, sometimes you find it hard to find friends. There was one other that I don't have time for now that Donald Trump threw out over the weekend, slashing and burning on Ron DeSantis. That's fine. I guess he feels like the game's afoot, and Ron DeSantis is his most critical opponent, and so he might as well go ahead and go after the man. A lot to be said about the DeSantis-Trump mano a mano, should that come to fruition, and many of us believe that it will. That said, I think it's a bad look. I put this up on my social media on Twitter. Ron DeSantis is in New York, and he's meeting with some of the folks up there, and he's wearing these white boots, and it looks like he's got a stormtrooper outfit underneath his clothing. I don't think that's a good look, Ron. Maybe that's just me. Chick-fil-A. You eat Chick-fil-A, Wayne? Chick-fil-A? Okay. Would you eat a Chick-fil-A cauliflower sandwich? All right. Would you eat a Chick-fil-A cauliflower sandwich? Would you try it if I gave it to you? Cauliflower being like the substitute for chicken.
I would try it.
If I gave you one, you'd give it a go.
I would try it.
I would too. And only because I've tried these cauliflower bites, like buffalo cauliflower bites that are on menus nowadays as a substitute for chicken bites or a substitute for chicken wings. They're good. I know. I'm as surprised saying it as you are hearing it. They're good. I would try this. What I'm fascinated with, Chick-fil-A has announced that they are trialing a Chick-fil-A cauliflower sandwich in 3 different locations. In Denver, Charleston, South Carolina, and Greensboro, North Carolina. They are sampling the new offering to see if there's, any interest in that. The new sandwich, according to the Daily Mail, has deeply divided fast food aficionados. Some welcome it, others say that it's a silly sideline. Here's what I don't understand. A lot of people online are accusing Chick-fil-A of going woke. And I don't really understand how this is going woke. I mean, I can understand why people wouldn't have any interest in it. I mean, Chick-fil-A is delicious. And, I mean, if you've not availed yourself, you need to do so. But most of you have, based on the numbers that I see on a regular basis as to the amount of money Chick-fil-A is making. This would be a $7 chicken or $7 sandwich that contains no meat, considered not only fully vegetarian, it's only considered vegetarian due to its cooking environment, meaning they can't call it vegan, although it doesn't contain any meat product whatsoever. It's in the same room as chickens, and it's in the same room as, things that are frying up that are chicken related. So they won't call it fully vegan because some of that might get in there. But it is fully vegetarian. I would try one of these things. I think it's a great, and I don't think it constitutes going woke. I think it's just opening yourself up to an audience that might not want chicken. That might want a vegetarian alternative. I like it. All right, 6:49. We'll talk about presidencies in just a moment on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Hi, I'm Paul Winkler. I've been teaching investing on Nashville airwaves for over 20 years with the Investor Coaching Show. And in that time, I taught a lot about how markets work and how we invest money and academic principles of investing money. But I've also talked an awful lot about how to avoid the mistakes that people often make with their money. Think about it. A lot of people sold out of the market at the worst time when COVID struck, or when TARP happened, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, or gold, they invested in that at the worst time. Bailing out of the market because they were worried about Y2K or 9/11 or jumping into energy stocks or jumping into cryptocurrency. One of the things that I like to do is educate investors, because I believe that the more educated you are, the more confident you are, and the more confident you are, the more successful you can be as an investor. Now, I not only do that on our radio show, but we do that in our offices around the Nashville region, 10 offices. To learn more about our approach to investing and financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call. Or you can call 615-851-1950.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's a promo so nice. We played it twice. It is 6:58. We're winding down the drive. I'm subbing in for Brian Wilson. He's back tomorrow. I'm back in my normal position from noon until 3. Much else to discuss. I could stay here another 2 hours, but they won't let me. Let me cover a couple of things. One, Richard Belzer, comedian actor, dead at the age of 78 over the weekend. That's very sad. Celebrity birthday. Charles Barkley celebrating a birthday today. Happy birthday to Chuck. He is 60 years of age. Got a great Chuck story that I don't have time to tell you. One quick story from my favorite president, silent Calvin Coolidge, though. Calvin Coolidge was known to be a man of few words. And everyone knew this while he was president. He was having a state dinner, and there was a woman unknown to him sitting beside him at the state dinner. And knowing that it was difficult to get him to engage in conversation, the woman said, "Mr. President, I have a bet with some of my girlfriends that I can get you to say more than 3 words to me tonight." And President Calvin Coolidge looked at her and said, "Madam, you lose." My favorite quote, maybe of all time, on Calvin Coolidge. Tomorrow at 12 noon, that's an official tease. It's 7 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.